fellow citizens. Welcome to the 11th episode of the Citizens Chat Show. Thank you very much for being with us this long, and we are still moving on. So just last week, we had a very interesting discussion on making an analysis of the 35 years of President Museveni, and of course with a special focus on the 10 points program. The debate was too long and it was interesting. I hope you learned throughout the discussions that we shared and the conversations that were ongoing on our different platforms. And today we are making a further analysis of the 10 points program. But again, we'll have a special focus on the prospects for the new term. The swearing in just happened 2 days ago. And here we are. We need to know how far are we going into the new term. My name is Masesa Demiano, your show host, and I'm joined on the panel by interesting guests that were here last week, apart from one person. The usual guests, we have Sarah Bireete, the Executive Director of the Center for Constitutional Governance, and Joseph Ochieno. Someone was asking me that do we have to maintain the president of contesting for UPC presidency?
Because they're in court.
So we need to make that clear as you make your submission.
Contestant.
Yeah.
Indeed, I am in court. We're in court, so as a matter of courtesy, I'm a presidential candidate because I don't want to declare myself president until it's duly done in that way. But yeah, technically I would be. But yeah, the best is that I'm a candidate, and most unfortunately, we do not have a president. But in theory, we should be having somebody who's holding fort, that the Constitution and the law of the land provides. Yes.
Interestingly, also now you are one of our regular almost panelists, and Rugyendo, Arinaitwe, you're our guest today.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's a slight change. Our two panelists couldn't make it, and I think because of a long, prolonged holiday, they sent in apologies, but Rugyendo joined in. And thank you for honoring the invitation.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, Desmond Tutu, fellow,
Yes.
PhD student, and a journalist,
Okay.
most importantly.
Enough.
Yes. Thank you for being with us, Rugyendo. And
Welcome.
my name is Demiano Masesa, your host, as usual. So just about last week, we were doing the analysis, but because you're not on the show, I'll just briefly allow you to give us a little analysis of the 35 years of President Museveni before we kickstart on the remaining parts of our topics.
Oh, okay. Okay, he's in the 35th year now, right? Yes. What is the analysis? I think probably
35th, so he took office for 36.
35th, right? 36. No, he's
It's going to
on the
36.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
So we're going to the actually. I think to begin with, I can say I've also lived. Really, I have lived in President Museveni's regime, or dispensation, I should say, of the NRM. I think the time they came in 1986, I was barely 9 years old, and so I cannot really clearly say I have experienced anything else apart from the politics of the national resistance movement, what they came pronouncing through the 10-point program. I've been keen to follow what has been happening. There has been a fundamental change, in my view, really, in very many areas, and also some fundamental mistakes in a number of areas. One, they promised democracy, really, which is about the rule by the people, for the people, and whatever you want to call it. And so, what I can say, in my view, along the 35 years, I have seen, I should say, a quantitative political participation of the entire country. If you look at all elective positions, right from the village up to the presidency, everybody is participating, and that alone is an indication that the country over the last 35 years has been granted the momentum, the chance, the space to participate. Whether the participation has been qualitative, that is debatable. But at a quantitative level, I would say political participation is much, much better off than what we hear that used to happen previously, before NRM came here. And of course, democracy is also about political organization. People should be free to belong to where they belong, they want to belong. And that freedom is contestable. It's a contested area. I have really experienced, I've seen, I have covered different situations where sections of the population do not feel that they are actually really participating in the political process from where they are, from where they want to belong. Political parties were banned, I think, for the first 10 or so years. It was only what we used to call the broad-based movement system that they embraced everybody, even if you didn't feel you liked Museveni, you had to belong to what his political line was. And I think that was also necessary because of what the country had gone through. But along the way, 2000, after the referendum, it was necessary that those who wanted to break free should go and establish their own political houses. And I think where the contestation is at the analysis where political belonging was supposed to be about revamping the old political parties that had come with or brought bad memories before, or we have new dispensations, or we have new houses, I should say, political houses. And for me, why I want to credit the NRM is not that the old parties should not have returned. No. I think it is that we now have certain key political groupings that transcend parochial lines. If you look at FDC, for example, if you look at recently NUP, for example, if you look at ANT, for example, I don't know what the other one, minus UPC-DP, because I am Catholic. I remember when I was growing up, I was supposed to belong to DP. Some people who are Protestant are supposed to belong to UPC. If you are, I don't know, Muganda, you're supposed to belong to Kawaka Yaka. So if you look at these 3 or 4 parties, and I think there's a time I even wrote about it in some publication, this is where, for me, I have seen some qualitative change. We now have political parties that transcend parochial lines. You don't have to be a Mnyankore or a Muganda to belong to FDC. You don't have now to be a Catholic or a DP, or a Protestant or a Muslim to belong to ANT. We have some semblance of national parties that have evolved, but we are still yet to go, because real political parties should emerge out of a process of socio-economic transition, when people no longer have to think about their own selfish interests, but think about national interests and as the basis for forming political groupings. For me, that's why I have seen some qualitative change. Now, whether that has been qualitative enough is something for Sarah to dissect, because because I see the way she's looking at me, and she's so intimidating sometimes. But but for me, you know, for me, that is for me the quality. I think when Museveni was talking about democracy, that people will no longer have to be beaten to belong to, to be stopped to belong to any political groupings they want or the belief they wanted. I think this is what has emerged out of something called NRM, and that now parties that are emerging are around interests. They're no longer around color, tribe, religion. That's what I have seen over the last 35 years on the political front. Economically, of course, what were we collecting in 1986? 4 billion shillings. Now we are more or less into around 2021 to the 2 trillion shillings. And GDP-wise, the economy has been really roughly moving at about 5% averagely, and that is now at the macroeconomic level. Micro, I think the NRM still has the challenge, and they admitted that 60% of the population, and I think a year ago was 68, I don't know how it has come to 60, maybe there's some improvement going on, but 60% of the population are not yet in the money economy, and I think this is a serious dent on the NRM's 35 years. 35 years of consistent or consistent average growth that is only felt in the macroeconomics, but microeconomics, where you and I belong, my small relatives somewhere in the village where they belong, they don't seem to see, they don't seem to feel that there has been a fundamental change in their economic lives. You know, it is very, very expensive, for example, to send a child to school. It shouldn't be. It's very expensive to access medical care in the private hospitals. Those are the things I think that when you are assessing 35 years of NRM should be fixed, because then, you know, people will start questioning about what the meaning of liberation and whether we have had total liberation or not. And that, I think, is the biggest challenge. Security-wise, perfect, really. I really give NRM 80%. You know, corner to corner, you know, we have security, and they've really done their best regionally, you know, in trying to mitigate any situations that would impact on our own security apparatus. Really, we have to give it to the Uganda People's Defense Forces. What else did they promise? There were many points, but for me, where I have a quarrel, serious quarrel, by the way, is I think the NRM had talked about an integrated self-sustaining economy, that with a mixed kind of economy approach, which has not happened, and for me, this is why I have problems, because yes, this is the 10th problem, and because, you know, right now, you know, the feelings that capitalism has taken over. Actually, we are operating a neo-capitalist economy in this country, where the participation of the state is almost zero. Apart from keeping security and politics, the rest, everybody for themselves. And that's very dangerous, because if you look at countries like China, which have really almost surpassed the United States, there is something they call capitalism with Chinese characteristics. That's their philosophy now, and for the last 15 years is what has catapulted them to where they are. You've had their quarrels with Jack Ma, because you cannot just divest completely from even strategic areas like electricity. Yesterday, I got a little disturbed because I could not watch events.
Couldn't watch your day.
But Tumeme said they will not switch off. Anybody. So
how do you say?
Are you part of Uganda?
Thank you. How do you say? How do you say that we have so much electricity? Because now we're doing about what? I think 1,300 something megawatts.
Yeah.
From 60 in the 1986. But just here, you know, a few meters after Kororo, people can't have electricity. These are consequences of divesting yourself out of and leaving it to sharks, leaving certain strategic services that are meant to liberate the population to sharks. People, because somebody who is a capitalist, their motivation is simple, and it is known from simple elementary economics of senior 5 that they are profit-driven. They don't care whether you have a national function or not.
Actually,
as long as they are making
3 commas.
Thank you very much. So I have a quarrel there because I need to see the state come into some of these strategic areas, like banking services. You just cannot completely leave it to the market forces, because then people need cheap credit to be able to move things. You have built roads, yes, but I mean, I can't reach the market. Why? Because fuel is high. the cost of fuel is very high. Or the cost of producing my goods is very high because electricity tariffs are high, and then the cost of money, I cannot borrow, to be able to produce cheaply and make a profit. These are the challenges now that have come with maybe somebody needs to reboot. 35 years, you just reboot a little bit, and it's what I want to wait and see if there's going to be a reboot.
It was rebooted two days ago, so
yes, let's
keep
see,
hope alive.
Let's hope the reboot
I'm still waiting for the screen to turn on, because I'm not yet seeing the screen.
Thank you very much,
Sorry,
I will give you hope.
Let's see what Sarah says. So we made a thorough analysis on issues economic. So I want us to dig deep into, because they talked of consolidating national security and eliminating, total elimination of sectarianism. But of course, Rugyendo was talking about removing all that and having us into a single party rule and what. But then, when, of course, when they came, they faulted the past government of UPC and Amin on sectarianism.
My responses are waiting.
Yes. You're itchy. Yeah, where of course we would see UPC in of course the UPC outside Kampala was for Protestants. Then the KY was Buganda Protestants. Then of course DP where you're supposed to belong.
Do you want me to respond to that directly so that when Sarah takes more substantive data?
Maybe okay.
Yeah.
Sorry if it's okay. I don't know.
Actually, really know that because it was very interesting because as a citizens forum, Rugyendo's interventions were quite apt, and you were being very generous, including by confirming the fact that you were hardly a toddler when these guys came to power. And I think you've also been very honest intellectually by suggesting that most of the contextual analysis about the political realities before NRM, in your case, were basically based on speculation. So I really want to help in a very direct way. There were four main political parties before NRM came to power: Uganda People's Congress, the Democratic Party, the Conservative Party, and UPM, which Museveni no longer talks about. Now, of all those political parties and organizations, the Democratic Party is the political party you can associate with Catholicism, and I happen to be a Catholic. Rugyendo, did you know that? You didn't know. Yeah. So you possibly thought because I lead UPC and possibly an Ochieno. Look, most importantly, no. But the results of the Democratic Party was actually Chiganda thing. When the colonialists came in, Christianity came, it was really within Buganda conflicts between Catholics and Protestants. And there was a war, and the war of 1892, where Protestants defeated Catholics. Since then, Protestants, now in Mengo, they take over power, the British Protestants in Entebbe. So Catholics are actually generally suppressed. So when the Uganda National Congress, which is UP, founded in 1952, was founded, the Catholic establishment, because they're suppressed, and it's about how political party formations take place, the Catholics emerged with the DP as a political party to push for Catholic interest. So in a way, you could say the DP was the political party founded with Catholic interest, but in Buganda. Broadly beyond Buganda, you could really argue, and I've told Norbert Mao this, they needed to present themselves as a political party of a suppressed minority. The contradiction for them is that they became a conservative political party contradiction. So that's their weakness. So a political party in Uganda which is linked to religion is Catholic, is DP. No other political party. The political party in Uganda linked to tribe was the Conservative Party, because the Conservative Party in Buganda was in a way a bit of KY, formed as a political party to advance Uganda conservatism. All the political parties in this country have really never been associated with the religion or tribe. Uganda National Congress, Uganda People's Congress, on the other hand, is the most fantastic political party in this country, and why it still remains a headache to Mr. Museveni. Reason being, founded in the early stages of the 40s as the African voice and against the British and Asians, things like that. It was about our African rights, our fair trades, agriculture, employment, leading towards independence campaign for our national emancipation, things like that. Happens that Musazi was a privileged Protestant in Buganda. And then after that, when Uganda National Congress is founded, because of relative Protestant privilege in the country, most of the leaders emerged from around the country who were mainly Protestants. Now, beyond that, there was nowhere, and there's nowhere in Uganda where there's no UPC in every village in this country, primarily because it was a nationalist political party. Now, when Museveni came, for whatever his reasons, when he was forming his actual UPM, his argument, including taking on the leadership of UPM, which he pushed from Mr. Kena Pujok, who was an Acholi, he told the DP guys that, well, Uganda needs a new political party, one which is not from the East or linked to religion, and it needs a political party with an army. So the argument was that for him, he's a soldier, he's got an army, military base, and DP is for Catholics, UPC is for Protestants. So it's a narrative that NRM guys actually built. But it's really not a reality. Now, going forward, we hope after Museveni finishes his 40th year, we hope there will be change. And because for you, you'll now be 40 plus. so Ugandans can genuinely begin to look at political parties, including the contextual history of UPC and DP on their own merits. So to be fair, that's the case. So really, tribalism and religionism in political parties and organizations, while they actually do exist there about, from community to community, hasn't really been an entrenched thing. So it's not about too much crediting new political parties versus the old, but really about putting context where we are. And so being a community TV, just repeating, there is really no reason why a political conversation doesn't emerge in Uganda on the basis of issues. And you're right, political parties usually emerge out of grievances, and UPC's grievances was African grievances in Uganda seeking independence and fair civil liberties and fairness for the average African in Uganda. That's UPC's strength. DPC's strength was about the injustices Catholics in Buganda felt within the establishment from Mengo and the British establishment. All the other political parties that have emerged since then, they can determine their own destiny, but that's the context.
Yeah, I think maybe that's why also UPC was at the swearing in, the only party present at the swearing in.
UPC wasn't at the swearing in. I understand Jimmy Akena was at the swearing in, and Jimmy is a legislator in his own right, so he will have had his invitation and he will have made his decision.
I say a number of ex-UPCs also.
Those will be there, because actually Rugyendo made an early interesting point, Sarah, about how NRM became a alleged mass party. Stop giving these guys too much credit. NRM banned political parties for 20 years. So Ugandans were conscripted, to use Obote's words, conscripted into NRM. So Ugandans like Masesa, he found himself born when his parents were in NRM because it was by force. So the issue now for the rest of Ugandans is to undo themselves away from NRM because they're basically forcibly conscripted there. That's how NRM became the established thing in Uganda. And for 20 years is not a short time. So there's no boasting that NRM is a Karamoja thing or NRM is a Toro thing because they had been rejected in 1980.
No, but
thank you. Let me
they weren't NRM at that time. You should know that. But
Yeah.
what emerged was a different
If I may,
grouping,
if
which
I
is
may,
what
come-
they started
Now,
with PM.
Sarah will give a legal context.
Sarah, before
But there was no.
your
I don't think there was conscription
before
per se.
Rugyendo claims that
it was being born out of the contradictions of the past.
No, no,
But
no,
we needed to take that direction.
Okay, Rugyendo, Sarah, but also there is on issues of sectarianism and also national security. There is this ongoing debate that the deployments all over are from a different region, and you've always been so much critical on these debates in the security and what. So I want, while you're also having your take, you need to have a take or a go on that also.
Okay, briefly, as my brother Rugyendo was explaining about the purported progress, I think we need to, 35 years is a long time.
very long.
These are two generations of leaders. And so let me use an example, for example, electricity. We have now our coverage of electricity is at 29%. And the average coverage of electricity consumption in sub-Saharan African countries is 42%. But we also, the leadership boasts of having power that's too much for us to consume. But even here in prime areas where we work from, we can spend a day or two without electricity. So where is this power
Including
that
Minister's Village of Kampala.
Ugandans are failing to consume? And two, what is the connectivity of electricity countrywide? 29% after being, in power for 35 years. And the first slogan in 1986 was modernization of agriculture. Yesterday, the swearing-in ceremony, agriculture was again mentioned as a critical area because people produce too much, then they need now to, agro-industrialize and that kind of thing. But people have no capacity even to do cottage industries because they don't have power. Even the people who can afford power, giving ourselves as an example and other corporate entities, we don't see the power. And then Ugandans, there are very few Ugandans who can afford power because it's too expensive. And the president of recent has been lamenting about meme contract. Again, when you are a president, every contract has clauses for withdrawal and termination. If you are a president and then you are lamenting to the people, people passed me on a clause that I and brought to this meme, are you in charge? So, but away from that, the economy again that Rugyendo talked about, we talk of progress, but when you sit down to quantify this progress, you can't put your hands on it. Because if it was a bus moving and said today we are going to Nairobi, we all know by bus you need about 11 hours at most to get to Nairobi. 8 to 11, depending on whether there are stopovers or. And if it's by plane, Nairobi is 45 minutes away from Kampala. But when you don't have a timeline and indicators, and then you keep talking of progress as an amorphous thing, at times it gets difficult to quantify. Because we know that 80% of Uganda's economy is concentrated in Kampala. But also, Kampala has a population of about 3 million. Yes, if you have 3 million, controlling 80% of national economy, how about the other 39 million that live in the countryside? The president, when he took oath last time in 2016, he promised Chisanja Hakuna Mchezo that should have come with the middle income status in 2019. People
got scared and others got excited.
Yes. So, but we know that only 7 districts in Uganda have attained lower middle income status. And that includes Kampala, Wakiso, Mukono, Jinja, Masaka, Mpija, and Imbarara. Lower middle income status. And 6 out of these 7 districts that have attained lower middle income status were won by NUP.
Interesting,
yeah. So I see Rugyendo shaking.
No, it's okay. I can come in there. You see,
Let's conclude. Then
let's conclude.
The next year.
So I think to me really when we talk of economy and progress, we need to see this progress in the hands of the people as compared to a few. We can talk of economic progress for a few Ugandans, but do we talk of economic progress for the general citizenry that cannot afford medical care, that cannot afford school fees? We see 50% dropouts of UPE, even when we say it's universal primary education. We know that the government for the last budgets have been allocating 7,000 per child in UPE schools for 1 year. How can 7,000 educate a child for 1 year? What are you purchasing? The president has been condemning schools charging fees when he's offering universal primary education. But which universal primary education is he offering? When you budget for 7,000 per child per year, what can this do? And why can't schools ask parents to pay money? So these are some of the things that we must interrogate in depth and move away from sloganeering. But going to the question of security, we have one of the best trained security forces in Africa, highly trained in terms of security, specialized training, in terms of formal training.
And discipline.
No.
Education.
No, now let me please make my point. Formal education and the specialized security training. There are no complaints. But when it comes to credentials, as to whether they pay their allegiance to Uganda as a country and the citizens of this country, and whether they pay their allegiance to the regime of NRM and the leader of NRM, I think that's where there is a problem. In my view, we have these highly educated people, highly trained, highly equipped, thanks to our partners that contribute to the security sector empowerment and capacity building. But when it comes to allegiance and you say here there is NRM and here there is Uganda, I think 80% of them choose NRM, and that is fundamentally wrong, unconstitutional, illegal, and we must condemn it.
You said you think. Is that the case?
She's being very diplomatic.
I think the point. I think the confusion in my view when it comes to security is that people will think I'm also partisan, but I am just trying to really be a realist.
Oh, sorry, you're not. Okay.
I'm going to be a realist. Your constitution, you're a lawyer, I'm not a lawyer, but your constitution says, it says...
Non-partisan.
No, listen, that the president is at the same time a commander-in-chief of the armed forces.
Yes.
So if a president of the armed forces, of the country, is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, and also is also a president of a ruling party, it necessarily follows that somehow...
The security have to be partisan.
Not partisan, but you may not link, say, the entire security consciousness outside party support.
So thank you for confirming my point.
In terms of...
Yes, for confirming my point.
Let me talk.
Yes.
You see, the point is that when you have a ruling party...
Yes, Rugyendo.
And a party that is outside the
like
government structures.
Which is outside, yes.
That's a different matter. Because then, if a ruling party is in place and it is in charge of government is also part of, security is also part of government. And naturally, it is the duty of the security forces
to be part of the ruling party.
To be part of the ruling government. That's the whole point. The government that is in charge at that point is the government, and therefore it is the government that runs the security apparatus, the security forces that deploys them.
So they are an addition.
So the point is that for me the analysis is where the analysis is failing, is that we're confusing. We are failing to understand that once a party is in power, it's no longer a party. It's now government, and that's where the challenge is.
No.
And then secondly, of course, you know, this country. And Joseph, you really I expect you to agree with me on this, because between 30 years before 1986, we all know what insecurity in this country meant or was, and how it panned out. And so, part of the problem part of the issue that you call a problem of this country, where security forces are assumed to be partisan, has a history in terms of our security build-up over the years, and that is going to, I think, in my view, going to take a long time. Why? Because the NRM was you are the one who said it actually, was born out of a military consensus, of a military not a military consensus, but a military
solution. Thing. Still
not a military solution. It was just born out of that, and so the fusion is something that has to, over time, win itself of that so-called allegiance, and then becomes a truly national army. But I think, the consensus
so
of
we
2000.
Don't have a national army.
The struggle.
You see the point. You make me lose my point. But the point is this: around 2005, when we debated the constitution, I think that was 1995. That was resolved. That was resolved in terms of structure, in terms of management of the security forces, of the army especially. People were very livid about the name, for example. Does it remain National Resistance Army, or it becomes Uganda People's Defense Forces? And so, all those are indications that what we have is a national army, and that then they pay allegiance to a commander-in-chief who happens to be a party president of a party called NRM. That that is an ongoing discussion. And I think we need to give it to them. We need to give it to the NRM people.
No,
They cannot win themselves of that history. But at the same time, once you have a government in charge, a government in power, there's no way you're going to say then the security forces should pay allegiance to the president of UPC. It's not going to happen.
No, Rugyendo, just
Demiano,
conclude
before
the
you come
elections.
in,
Yes.
if I may give Rugyendo some information. During the debate of the UPDF Act, this nation debated at length as to whether we should have a repeat of previous regimes, where every regime would come with their own army and go with it. And the new regime comes and also creates their own army. So previously we were having armies that pay allegiance to a regime and go with that regime. And of course we have only transited through military coups. And we are yet to see as a country if we are able to overcome that. No, yes. Whether we are able to overcome that. So the debate in the Constitution to make sure the military is non-political and non-partisan took all this history into context. But the practice is that we are seeing a partisan army.
I think it is.
No. Rugyendo, you will come in. We are seeing a partisan army that even engages in campaigns, even when we have laws that explicitly condemn such acts with even punishment. We saw the brigadier in massacre. We saw so many generals in campaigns. So it is not theoretical that the army does not campaign for the NRM and the president. We have also seen practices, partisan conduct when they are administering security. We had election violence. Half of it was, or more than half. I'm trying just to be lenient in this, really, because the police did very little in the just concluded elections as compared to the army. And for the first time, and previously, the army that was known as pro-people, peaceful, progressive, tarnished all their image in the previous election. They are trying to play football to rebuild it. I don't think whether that is possible. So we saw acts of violence, targeted violence against opposition by this army. Yeah. And it is documented. And that's what I'm talking about.
Just a moment.
Let us first go away from
because Sari is turning me into an army spokesperson,
which is wrong. Let me.
But the thing is this.
I'm in charge. I'm in charge here. I'm in charge here.
2 points. I think
I'm in charge here.
2 points. Just 2 points. I'm responding to Sarah.
So what I'm saying,
just 1 minute.
I'm in
She
charge.
has accepted. Sarah, let me tell you. I think I agree with you. By the way, I agree with you with the analysis because of what you see on the streets. If the army has said, please, Sarah, don't go this way, and you refuse and go the other way, certainly you confront them. And when you happen to be an opposition person, they will say the army is being partisan. But I think what has happened over the years, since that debate about the UPDF Act, let me tell you, this army, in my view, for me, from a journalistic point of view, and I have been following really what happens inside that military, the composition now is a composition of all shades of armies that have been part of the process, that have been part of it. A few individuals conduct themselves differently. These people come from us.
As always.
Can I give you information? For
That
example,
has always been the case.
There is a military installation that I know. I'm not going to mention the name.
We are getting off the
There is a
topic,
military
yes.
installation during the last election. Did not vote Museveni. Did not vote him.
Yeah, true.
About
Okay,
about 80% of them.
last week we had an extensive discussion here. Let me bring in Rugyendo.
The military, they don't say go and vote so and so. They also have
Rugyendo,
conscience.
let's get here.
Some of them actually vote some of these people in the opposition.
Ochieno, just concluded the elections.
So
yeah.
when I say
They just concluded the elections.
you are a partisan.
So we had a return of sectarianism, or a kind of hint on sectarianism, where you see a president talking about one party being voted because of a region. That's a very serious return on the discussion on sectarianism, which I think should have been something that was clearly eliminated. But also in there, we've been having shades of discussion that comes with the deployments in the police and army in line with a given region, and the names are being highlighted from a different region, government sectors from a given region, and all this. And this debate keeps coming. I want us to have a honest discussion on this. Do we see that, can we confidently say that this was really eliminated, or because it's still something that we are having today?
No, Damien, and I'm sorry because I feel very sorry for you as the moderator of this program, because
I'm being hijacked.
what we've been discussing, I will actually help Rugyendo. It actually shows possibly how polarized this country is. Rugyendo is a young man, and he's found himself completely embroiled in this thing, and absolutely emotively taken. What Rugyendo expresses is absolutely himself, because he can't express anything else, because he doesn't really know anything else. And Rugyendo is a fantastic guy. He's a good friend of mine, and he'll get even better, you know.
What a bright.
So now we had hoped that and of course the disadvantage, to be fair to you, the disadvantage you were not here last week, because we tried to focus very much on the Museveni's big Agenda 10-point program, and we are suggesting that within the next few minutes maybe we wrap it up. But no, clearly it's very sad, because there has been very little change, and in many cases possibly the situation has gotten worse. When I was actually intervening around the context of the political party composition and history, I would have hoped that 35 years of NRM would have helped us to move farther away. Sarah here always sometimes when she's got space will tell you her own background, family, political background. And possibly, she's possibly one of the best hopes of where you see we start from a particular angle, hopes dashed, possibilities, hopes dashed. There was a conversation I had recently with somebody from Ankole. And this individual shocked me. I hadn't thought about it. Rugyendo, you're a journalist. About how many generals Uganda has currently under NRM, under NRA, the UPDF as you call it. How many come from, quote, Western Uganda? And how many come from a specific composition of, is it a district or something like that? Demiano Masesa. That is part of what you're saying. Now, if that is real, and it's very much about the army that Rugyendo almost wanted to dance on the chair to make the point about, tells you sort of like how slow the progress has been. If anything, there's been a progress backwards. You hint on the police and police composition. I saw some literature actually going around leading to elections last year. Even I had not really seen it this deep, that how many of the district police commanders, regional police commanders, and things like that. You know, it's very clear. The composition, the loyalties, they're too obvious. I really don't want to make it a depth of a subject here. Go to the civil service. I don't want to make it a depth of service here. I suggested, Rugyendo, while you're away, that 10 out of 10, NRM on the 10-point program, they actually get 0. But 0 normally does not mean that you've not tried and gotten some one or two things. You know. But because there is an opportunity for Mr. Museveni to go forward, it is actually possible that he can cleanse his record and focus particularly on those key issues. You know, the question of national identity, meaning so-called tribalism, is, in my opinion, the most important thing. I was being transported by an Uber driver, strangely enough from one of these TV programs you were hosting me. And he passed a number of cars. He basically made a mistake. He jumped on, and then he found a police officer waiting. And I told him, just go out, go and apologize to these guys, simply say you made a mistake, because I just thought maybe you might create an argument. I'm not wasting time on this issue. He got out, did as I told him, tried to give the guy money, which I thought was now very interesting. The guy refused, and the guy gave me a ticket. I'll cut it short. As it happens, the guy came back furious that how dare he, because he had just accepted money from the one before me, and I saw it. Now, I didn't really see it, that's me. So the guy now went ahead and made a very sweeping statement. I'll make it on this program deliberately. You know, he said that The guy accepted bribes from the person before him. He asked for his ID, driving license. It had a name, had without prejudice a particular name. And he concluded that this guy gave him a ticket because of his name, meaning his identity, not a northerner, basically, or not a northern eastern, you know. And the person he left, whom he gave money, was from somewhere in particular. So this was recent. Then I told him that, you know what, I was playing leadership Rugyendo, and this is how leadership is played. I said, look, that guy saw me seated behind, in my decent glasses. He possibly didn't know who it was. And maybe very likely he might have just got scared. He didn't want to get bribed from because he didn't know whom you're carrying. And then I thought, let me make this the point. And it's possibly the point. The guy calmed down. I gave him 10,000 to contribute to his ticket and went away. Now, if this is a young Ugandan or somebody in his maybe just about 30 or thereabout, we haven't really moved very far. And that's why I was saying 2 days ago, I think I was telling Sarah during, just before we came on air, that Mr. Museveni could have used this opportunity instead of bashing the West, his friends, and bashing Ugandans. He could have used it to simply say that we've heard you about what happened in the recent elections. Things could have been done better. We've heard your cries. We know we made certain mistakes. I'm going to try in this time, like the other Muchezo thing, I'm going to try and clamp down on certain things. You do that, you give a signal. You give a lead on which you're able to start as a nation. I think that is where I would have expected Mr. Museveni to do, and it's another wasted opportunity for him. But beyond that, generally where we are, on the other indices, I say 10 out of 10, 0.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Sarah, you raise a hint on the issues of the national value system, the values for the country. And now here, I think that answers the question of the consolidating of national independence and what, because that comes in play. Do you think we are faring, or do you think we really need these values for us to be out there?
Today is the first day for the new government. But I think President Museveni is steering a nation. And this one I can say without fear of any contradiction or whatever. Is steering a nation that is more divided, more fractured. And if we were to run a honest poll on citizens who have trust in him as a new leader that has assumed office on day one of this term, he cannot go beyond 30% endorsement of Ugandans, those who trust that he can do what he says he will do.
Should we blame him for bringing political parties?
Of course, political parties are not a problem. And let me say this, and I know Rugyendo hinted on it. You see, political parties are vehicles for political mobilization and for propagating different ideas for running the country. When an election ends, assuming that those elections are free and fair, not just an exercise of line up and select people, free and fair, credible elections. When the election period ends, a party that wins should be a government for everybody, not just their supporters. And that's where, again, we go wrong. If you are a president of Uganda, President Museveni took 2 oaths yesterday. Oath of allegiance to the Constitution and the laws of Uganda, oath of allegiance to protect Ugandans. He did not take oath to protect NRM and work for NRM. He's a president for everybody. But his actions, his speech, the actions of the army he chairs, contradict that oath and show that they are working for NRM. And that's why my brother Rugyendo was saying that if you have a party in power, then you have to work with that party. No. Once you assume government, you cease to look at yourself as a party. You look at yourself as government. You are government for everybody. If you are building a hospital, are you building it for your supporters? If you are building schools, I'm not asking you to respond, you'll have your time. If you are building schools or constructing roads, are you constructing them for NRM? Aren't you collecting taxes from everybody? Are you collecting taxes from NRM? If the army is paid, are they paid money from NRM or money from Ugandans? So when they come and you have instruments, he was given instruments of power, the coat of arms, the shield and whatever. Did he receive symbols of NRM or symbols of Uganda? So when you assume this power and you keep acting like a tribal chief What moral authority do you have to come and tell us about sectarianism?
Rugyendo, defending.
You don't have to answer.
No, he doesn't have.
No, how do you know that?
And consolidating national independence.
Anyway,
How far?
the most, is that why we are talking about sectarianism? I've not talked about sectarianism.
All right.
Okay, you have to first, then you go
Because
to that.
I was told to.
Yes.
You're instructed.
You see, all these things are issues of perception. Let me tell you, I've told everybody about that. At some point, actually, there's a time, I think in 2007, I wrote about this thing of sectarianism. And I was like, why can't we be, I was suggesting, you have lived out of Uganda, especially in the Western world, and you really appreciate
And
how,
across Africa.
you're right, how they treat this issue. You know, I was like, I think Africa needs to move beyond trivializing tribes and glorify them for positive results. For example, in the United States, people will vote as Hispanics, people will vote as Catholics, you know, they will vote as, how do you call it, Latinos, you know, and it's fine. But when it comes to Africa and Uganda, it's not fine, and I find that very, very funny. Because we cannot, you will not link ourselves unless we become robots. If you are Munyankore, you will be Munyankore forever. You're not doing anything.
Why was NUP faulted?
Why was Uganda being attacked?
Just a moment. Let me come to that.
I'm not hitting at you.
Let me come to that.
I'm just helping your point. No, actually, because you asked me earlier for the purpose of this conversation, and I sort of missed that point. Rugyendo, for your purposes, actually, historically, political parties will normally have their bases, including Uganda, and they did. And say DP, for instance, had Buganda, and it wasn't an issue. But Mr. Museveni played on it then when it was convenient for him. Now, more recently, when it came to the NUP supporting Buganda, it's Mr. Museveni who presented it as an issue. It shouldn't really be an issue. Rugyendo, it shouldn't really be an issue that a political party massively votes. So Masesa is actually right to ask you that it was actually Mr. Museveni who saw it as a problem. You know, that NUP was overwhelmingly was supporting Buganda. You're quite right. It shouldn't be an issue, you know, because we have, as I repeat, before DP was predominantly Buganda political party, and the UPC didn't see it as a problem. And Obote didn't see it as a problem. And Buganda got the best services, and Buganda were not whipped, unless and until, of course, some of them got in the crossfire when NRA guys went to the bushes.
But I think the point is that I don't think the way Museveni projected it was that it was because they had voted as a tribal enclave. The point was that
You need to read that.
because the point is he had lost in an enclave that happens to be Buganda. But Buganda, what is Buganda, by the way? I don't think it is what people
You
think
need
is
to
wrong.
revisit
Buganda
that speech of
because
his.
Buganda is
speech he talked about it.
Buganda is a collection of
After
every.
being
He said,
declared a winner, you
we
need to
fought
watch
this sectarianism, and it's something that.
But you
is
see,
cropping
I
up.
started so well before you actually interrupted. I was asking one question. I said, why don't we glorify our tribal enclaves for positive results? You know, it's just not about that. People should not call themselves Baganda, in my view, or Banyankore or Luos or anyone. No, I think the point is that we need to accept, in my view, that we are who we are, and then that we are diverse. We are diverse people, and because of that, then that should not be the basis of political participation, of resource allocation, and yes, which is, and I agree with that. But the point is that the issue is that is again our history. Is again, I think it might take a lot of time, in my view, a lot of time, a lot of education, a lot of change, what you call changeover, you know, from what has been to what we are supposed to be, and that takes time before people are socio-economically transformed. And I remember actually taking part in those discussions. There was a hot debate on social media around that same time when this issue came up, tribalism, and I was in some group. I don't know whether it was DOI or the other one. That what will solve this problem? You're talking of generals coming from some one district, or you know, even if actually what people are criticizing it as saying, you know, they're actually implying that, you know, they should also allow us to be to be in the same position because you're propagating the same tribalism or sectarianism for that matter. So in my view, I was saying, what can only stop this is when everybody is economically empowered, when everybody is thinking about industry, is thinking about manufacturing, is thinking about regional markets. That is what will stop all this. Because Uganda is not the only problem where that you find this ethnicity or sectarianism really hugely propagated. Go down here in Rwanda, you'll be shocked. Or even other countries. Even here in Kenya, people had to run here, if you remember. And that's a consequence of poverty, in my view. If people had money in their pockets. And again, that's why this is not an issue in the US, for example, or even in Europe. Why? Because these are industrialized countries. They talk about Mars. They are talking about going to the moon.
But
they are
also
talking
power
about,
is not concentrated in the hands of an individual.
But you also know, but you also know there are also issues of Black Lives Matter and all this, these things. But the point for me is that
racial issue which cuts across political divides.
And for me the point is because even racism is also sectarianism in its own way. So the point for me is that the discussion should be that the best way to stop it would be economic empowerment. It would be if countries move. If you're an agrarian country, there's no way I think it won't stop sectarianism. It's not going to stop. In my view, the point is that we need more enlightened people in the political space, more industrialized people in the political space to be able to, because industry transcends tribe, transcends a road like this that you're talking about, transcends tribes, transcends race. When you say when Museveni launches this borehole,
do you think it's possible to cap that when you're under one leadership for over these years?
Well, you see, that's a consequence of democracy again, because I mean, how does he come back all the time? That means people want him.
Which democracy?
It means people want him. He's choosing him. Is he choosing himself? Because that's the most important thing. Is he choosing himself?
Yes.
Is he electing himself? That's debatable. In my view, that's very debatable.
1986, who elected?
That's debatable. That was a consequence of a political disagreement that turned militaristic, and it had to be solved through military means. And I think that consensus is known.
Were you happy with this year's elections?
I
wanted to come back to that.
I was fairly impressed. Because
by what?
Because I think all sides were not following rules, in my view, and of course then ultimately the majority prevailed.
I think it would be worse if it wasn't for the COVID excuse. It would see worse.
What is the COVID excuse? COVID is everywhere. It's not only located in Uganda, in my view. But I think the analysis is that does longevity produce progress, confidence, and trust in government? That is, I think, where the analysis should be. And in my view, I think along the way, you'll have naturally what we call fatigue. And I think what we are discussing now in Uganda is not that Museveni has. That's why I disagree with you when you say really 10-point program is scored 0. Really, that's not true. But the point is that the country is facing fatigue, some kind of Museveni fatigue, I should say. And yes, that's why they say, okay, bring us anybody, then at least we can have some changeover. We can have some semblance of transfer of power.
So the country felt so.
Even the leading contender himself, Bobi Wine, was saying, I plan to make you my advisor or something like that. There's some belief that UAR has done something.
No, that is the tradition. That is the tradition in other countries.
Just a moment, that he needs to move on. Not that he should stay just because he continues to do. There's some belief that he has done something, okay? But probably time is up, okay? Time is up. Not that by his overstaying, the country is not benefiting. The country is doing something. There's something that's happening. There's change going on. There's progress going on. But there is what we call Museveni fatigue across the country. That's very
What
true.
change is going on? And did the same change go on?
How many megawatts of electricity were we producing in 1986? How many universities did we have in 1986? How many
radio
tarmac roads?
stations?
How many radio stations? How many? Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting. That is the topic I'm coming
We
on
are here
next.
talking.
Now let me come.
Yes.
Rugyendo, let's get there. Let's exhaust that. Come.
There are places on
We
this
are
planet
here
where this
talking
discussion can
thanks
take
to
place.
YouTube.
No.
Rugyendo, let's get there.
Not
Let's
on
get
radio
there. Let me
stations.
bring in.
But
Let me bring in.
We will
Ochieno,
agree.
and we're going to dissect that.
What we are discussing, I want us to discuss whether Museveni fatigue is justified or not. Because I think that's the point.
Thank
The
you.
point is not that there's no progress.
Next program.
There's some kind of fatigue.
You've really taken over indeed.
Rugyendo, let me get you out of there. Let me get you out of there. We are going to discuss that.
Yes.
They talked of restoration, restoration and improvement of social services. It's just brought in the debate on universities, health services, roads and what. How far are we now in scoring with what he's saying? On hospitals, we have hospitals.
Why don't I continue with the point then?
No, let it get there. Then we reach here.
It's quite zero, as I said. Does zero means nothing's happened? No. Certain things have happened. And then, you know what?
Are you a mathematician?
And the
Zero
thing,
is zero.
no, by the way, I nearly got to,
You gotta say
the
20%.
first time I did a national exam, I failed on the one question in mathematics. The first time ever, a national examination. But look, no, it's extraordinary in public services. Rugyendo, public services and the mixed economic programs, which is the 10th program, where you bring in this marketization. If you read my column the other week, I suggested that health service in this country has now been life privatized, and simply because if anything happened to any of us at the moment, we begin having serious medical situations. Here, nobody is going to go to a public facility. None of us.
I've been there for the last 2 weeks.
I am just saying, nobody from here is going to public facility. For you, when you can I out you? For you, when you drive in a UC vehicle, how will you not go into perhaps a very specialized part of a public of health facility? But on a serious note, no, health services have been privatized. Educational services have been privatized. Even the infrastructure programs that Rugyendo wants to talk about, and of course we're not part of the program the other day, that's why we've been very generous to you earlier. That Entebbe Express Highway, Sarah always reminds me fantastically, that's the second most expensive road in the world. But of course when you're driving it, it is smooth. You feel good. You feel you've arrived, especially if you're driving a car for the first time. You know, you feel good. The Northern Bypass down here, it was a project which was built on the basis of UPC programs of 45 years ago. They built it, and then after 10 years, they started expanding it. The monies for that are monies, the money for your grandchildren, the money for our children.
45 years ago, UPC was
Yes.
in government.
You didn't know. No, the Northern Bypass was part of the Greater Kampala Orbital, which was supposed to be a motorway going around Kampala. We campaigned around these things. These guys picked it like a borrowed shot, and then they went fudge with it to half Kampala, and now it's going round, and people are making money out of it. If you have, you're a journalist who can undo things and unearth things from Uganda National Roads Authority, you find extraordinary things that has been done by this government. No, public services, they have, in the last 10, 15 years, realized that you can borrow money, siphon 50%, have some kind of elephant staff, impose your own people, and then there'll be numbered projects. That's on the one hand. On the other, you laugh at Museveni 2 days ago at his swearing-in when he was talking about abusing the West, you know? You and I know, nobody here, all of us here know people, mainly Ugandans, who are working on health facilities with projects funded by USAID, projects funded by DFID, projects funded by, you know, there's global agencies, many of these NGOs around the world, including those that people like to abuse, you know. Those guys continue to generously pump in the monies. If actually many of these agencies literally withdraw the money, forget about even monies that come directly via Ministry of Health, you know, this country would sink in 1 week. So it has been that spectacular. But I think it's really because Mr. Museveni, as his regime, have really never had the interests of this country at heart. And at a time when they started feeling in it, they suddenly realized that, look, you know, You can control Uganda and control Ugandans. Blackmail them like Rugyendo has partly bought the blackmail that Uganda cannot survive without them, and Rugyendo, I really sympathize with you. But you're a good man, because Rugyendo, if you came to know the truth, it's actually possible for you to see that no, this country has been taken for a ride. This country has been taken for a ride, and it is possible for it to be governed beyond the realms of the 10-point program, which was something that Museveni had to put on the table, because he had come in after the Okellos, after this confusion. He had thought initially that does he go the Cuban-style way, or what does he do? They had to present themselves as clean guys from the bush with wild shots, and to present something new to Ugandans. But really underline...
Even the bush, they already had it. It was written in the bush. You know,
Okay, Sarah, you need to chip
You
in.
really
in the
know.
bush,
You are 6 years, Rugyendo. You're part of this thing.
Well,
Carry
you were
on.
not there, you were on the run.
Okay,
So how did you
let
know?
me get Sarah on. Yes.
Yeah, when it comes to some of these
Yes.
fundamental questions,
Yes.
I wish we had. For example, if somebody says, I think President Museveni has delivered the economy, where did he inherit it from? He inherited the economy at the time when we had government parastatals, when we had the key cash crops we were exporting as a nation, when we had cooperative movements that were empowering the rural, the rural citizenry and farmers. And the rate of, the rate of foreign exchange earnings that we are able to balance our trade then. So if we were to do that analysis, everybody would understand that we are now, the taxpayer is servicing an economy that works for a few. We have regime billionaires. We have people today that are billionaires, but if government changed, you would give them 5 or 10 years to disappear from the private sector scene. We have people, you see these ones who line up for handouts from government. They line up. When you look at the businesses, they are very powerful people in the private sector. But an election comes, they put money in partisan campaigns. An election ends, they want to get back plow back their profits through bailouts at the expense of the taxpayer. That has nothing to do with their political deals. And this is the people we think that the economy has developed, because they are running on handouts and tax waivers and reliefs from government coffers. But when tomorrow these dynamics change, half of these regime billionaires, you would not trace them. And you don't need to go for, just look at the list of people who came forward for bailouts in 2016. When NRM is out of power, half of those people will not be anywhere in our economy. So this is the kind of economy that we are talking about. A citizen is on their own. Household incomes have collapsed. Those involved in agriculture, we have on, according to UBOS, 2020-2021 mid-statistics, we have 5% wage employable population in agriculture. We still have 76% dependent on agriculture. And when you come to our budget, where under the National Development Plan, strategic priorities and drivers, we have 3 sectors as strategic drivers for economic development: agriculture, tourism, and ICT. When you look at the budget for this year, let me read for you the statistics on these drivers of the economy. And that's when you will know that there is a disconnect between what the leadership talks about and what they do. Agro-industrialization, we have 1.6 trillion. It is 3.8% of the budget. Innovation, technology, development, transfer, we have 0.8% of the budget, and that is 344 billion shillings. Tourism development, we have 178 billion. That is 0.4% of the budget. Digital transformation, we have 134 billion. So when you hear that the new approach for this regime to do things differently, fight corruption, deliver services to a common man, is e-government. But digital transformation is 134 billion. What can you do with 134 billion? to build an e-government network. Is it possible?
How much does it cost? Maybe we should look at that as well.
No. Sorry.
How much would it cost?
Sarah is saying all the
How much would it
combinations,
cost?
all
So-
the combination of 3 priorities
Yes.
don't add up to 10%.
No.
Security
They
alone
don't. They don't.
adds to 17% or
They
thereabouts.
don't. By the way, if you do agro-industrialization 3.8, the rest is 0.8, 0.4, 0.3. So they don't
So
even.
hardly 5%.
They are about
Yeah, about 5%.
5.5%.
I think.
No. Before you
give me
intervene,
the
let me
context.
conclude.
Yes.
Let me
I agree with
conclude.
your figures.
Wait, I finish. Wait, I finish.
The context, yes.
So I've been asked
protected.
to compare. No,
Yeah.
so the key drivers of the national development plan are at 5.5% of
Less
the
than
budget.
6.
But when you come to security, it is at 6.9 trillion, and that is 15.6%
16%.
of the budget. So the drivers are 5.5, and the security is 15.6.
Okay.
So that shows you that our priorities are upside down, and they cannot.
Rugyendo can say, you can't
development.
believe your eyes,
Let me
Rugyendo.
tell you this. You see, it's also wrong to say, to just get just one financial year and then conclude that this is
This is the first year of government.
listen.
Other governments are waiting on the first 100 days.
This
We are weighing it as 1 year.
this budget was discussed.
Rugyendo, no,
Just a
Rugyendo,
moment.
sorry, let-
Can I come?
Rugyendo,
yes.
This budget was discussed.
Let's to gender.
This
Let's
budget-
to
this
gender.
budget-
Make
this
your
budget-
point.
This
Let's
budget
to
was
gender, make
discussed.
his point,
Oh,
yes.
sorry. This budget was discussed. I think during the time of elections. You know.
No, it has just
Including
been
now, we are-
approved.
we are-
Yes,
we are
after
moving
elections.
forward.
But you remember the
Yes,
discussion? The discussion of this budget usually actually about like 6 months to budget.
Yes, but
the
it's the
point-
first year
but
of
the-
this
listen,
government.
the point is this: you don't get one financial year to conclude that this is what the
Try
situation is
and
going to
add
be
5
for the next
financial
5 years.
years.
Okay,
Rugyendo,
add another
5
4.
financial years.
But
Add another
and
4.
let me also ask you: you will not have tourism, in my view. I am just trying to read the minds of these fellows.
That's correct.
You will not
Without
have
security.
tourism without
Very
security.
strange.
What?
You will not have this
Okay,
agriculture
what investments are you doing in security?
without human
How
capital
many
development.
tanks of tear gas are you purchasing?
You need
What
to
investment are
pay.
you
You
doing?
need to pay your army very well. If you don't pay them, they'll beat you up. They'll beat you up.
They are beating us. They were beating people as tonight. Where are they paying?
Look at your own. Let's look at your own statistics.
Let's
Human
have a
capital.
control- let's have a control-
Human capital development is
discussion,
actually
yes.
taking the most thing. 17%.
What
You
is
can't believe it.
Human capital
break it
development.
down. What is the vote?
Wages and all this and that and training and making
And that
sure.
includes the arm, of course.
Of course, no. This is
So it's training for.
this is security. Security is different from.
Okay, it's wages for.
I am not the Minister of Finance.
Of course you're not.
I am not the Minister of Finance. But the point is this.
Yes.
I think, of course, then, the jokes aside,
You're shocked.
no, I know what's going on, of course. I had read this. The point is that, of course, prioritization is key. If you're going to drive the economy to the middle income status, there are certain key things. If our NDP3 is prioritizing these 3 sectors,
And they're at 5.5%.
I would imagine we don't expect them to be 17%. I don't think so, really. It would be.
I think
not be realistic.
I would be happy
I would
if
be
they
able-
were 20%
I would be able
as
to see.
drivers.
For me, I would want to know.
Yeah.
I would want to look at the cost. What would be the cost, for example, for digital transformation? You know, then we would have a better argument. How do they arrive at this? Probably, maybe this is what they want in the first year, because you're not going to transform digital a nation in just one financial year. It's not going to be possible. I think probably it's a process. I think, but
Agriculture?
the argument that we're raising, agriculture, of course, honestly, agriculture, it's an improvement, of course, from last year, but I'm not yet satisfied.
And when
But
you
I'm not
are,
satisfied.
and when you go in the
We've been having
budget,
agriculture on
and when you
on
go
and
in
on
the
and on
budget,
for a long time.
even there are
But-
few elements that have that to do with agricultural value addition. Yet you are talking of agro-industrialization. When you go in the detail of the agricultural budget, there are hardly any elements that tackle the value addition.
Let's look at what is going to the parks, because when we're talking about value addition,
Yes.
actually after this show, I'm not sure somebody who's adding
done
value,
value
addition?
addition?
You better.
value something. But you see, when you look at manufacturing, I can see, it is small. I want to look at the parks. What is going to be invested in the parks?
Yes, really.
Wait, just a moment.
Which parks?
The industrial parks, agro-industrialization.
Innovation could be about
There's
innovation.
nothing.
Rationalization and
technology.
innovation, yes.
There's nothing.
0.8%.
Rugyendo, they need
Anyway.
an advisor. They need
Anyway, I think the issue for me is we need to look at
So the budget
the need.
does
My interest,
not-
because you're diverting my
Yes,
the flow
I think
of the debate.
for me, I think we need to look
We're
at
discussing
I would
on
be
the
able to give
restoration
a fair
and
argument,
improvement
a
on
fair
social
analysis.
services.
Yes. If I can,
Yes.
I would be able to give a fair analysis. If I looked at the needs assessment, what do we
Budget
need?
aside, budget
Yes,
aside,
budget
we are
aside, what do we
discussing
need? Yes.
restoration and improvement of social services.
over
social services.
over the 35
Over the
years.
35, the 10
Yes.
points program.
Definitely,
Yes.
this is a fact. Honestly speaking, we all know there was only one public university. There are now around 10 plus.
No.
Private ones, yes, there was one.
No.
86, there was only one public
Barara was
university.
opening.
Was eight- but-
Barara was an initiative of UPC.
Yes, no. I'm talking about 1986, 86. What was happening? And I don't think Mbara University can be. It cannot be an initiative of UPC. I remember very well. I remember very well. Mbara University was a donation from Cuba.
It was an initiative which already existed.
Okay, let it be. Fine. How many universities were in Uganda?
Carry on.
Yes. One public university. We now have 10. The country has, plus now the private ones, about 37 universities.
But
You'd rather have very many educated people than have few educated people in a sea of backwardness. We'd rather have very many educated people also in a sea of backwardness who will do something about their situations. It's better to have a critical mass of very many educated people than a critical mass of agrarian, primitive,
Can I ask a
uneducated
simple
people.
question?
So for me, in terms
Just
of
on universities.
in terms of education, at another point we'll
Just
discuss
on
quality.
Quick one on
universities.
education, then you respond at
We'll
once.
discuss quality.
Some information on
We'll discuss- yes,
universities,
yes.
on education. From the time President Museveni came to power, South Sudan has been fighting over the first war for breakaway from the Sudan now. And until recently, I think they are still struggling to implement their peace pact. But how many universities are in South Sudan? Could be having the same number of universities.
I don't think so. Why are they here? They all
I
here.
know they are here, but they are
Because of-
so no. My point is that all these countries also have developed.
Thank you very
private
much. That's okay.
universities.
That's okay. The question was, his question was, have we improved in terms of educational services since 1986?
Can we
It's
discuss
number-
the quality,
That's
not
That's what-
quantity?
No. We talk
Quality,
about. We
not
must talk about.
quantity.
We must talk about both.
Okay,
We must talk
tell us
about
about
quantity
quality.
and then quality.
Okay,
at the
tell us
same time.
about quality.
Quality is a debatable issue. I've been insisting on this. Quality is a debatable issue. We need to look at how many doctors, for example. Quality, what do you mean in terms of quality? In terms of quality, what do you mean? Is our education, for example, attractive, for example, in this region? I am aware that Uganda has the best educational tourism compared to the rest of the East African countries. It is very
You are an
it's
employer.
very much well known. It's well known that many of the neighboring countries pray to educate their children here in this country. It happened.
Rugyendo, you are an employer.
The other day,
No. Let me ask a direct
the
question.
daughter of the
Demian.
president of Tanzania was praising Uganda.
You are an
for the
employer.
education system.
Tell us the status of products you receive from universities that have completed
Well,
journalism.
they are some are impressive, excellent. Others are. That is a normal situation, in my view.
Normal.
For any country,
So,
for any country,
scoring on health,
health. Really,
number of doctors that we have, and
I don't have the full statistics. Definitely, 86. Everybody had run away, I would imagine. But now, at least we are churning out about 200 doctors every year from the 4 universities that are teaching medicine, and that is very impressive. Infrastructure-wise, health-wise, in terms of infrastructure, perfect. The problem is in terms of the tools and methods of delivering medical services in this country. It is still questionable, and I'm seeing a lot of effort there. If you even look at your budget, I think there's some. I can see an effort because everybody has talked about this health question, and I think you will not say we are worse off. than
How
we
are
were
the
in
rural
1986.
hospitals like Itojo and the rest?
I don't have the facts. but I know that there's effort in terms of equipment going on right now. The other day, they were delivering, I think this budget, they're going to be delivering 16 ICUs in the regional referral hospitals. And I have seen, especially in terms of
But you
of
come from
improvement.
Mutunga.
Listen, in terms of improvement of infrastructure. Infrastructure is very, very important. And the quotas for the doctors where they sleep, very, very important as well. Their remuneration is very, very important. And I think what remains now is the tools, which I think is an issue that the next government should address and seriously to be able to have a better and improved healthcare system in this country. I would advocate for a national insurance scheme, health insurance scheme, for example. If that can be implemented, I have heard there's a discussion around that.
How long does this take? Because we are talking about 35 years.
Well, I don't know.
36 years.
How would I
How long
know?
should
I
this
don't
take?
work with government.
Something like this.
Like I don't work with government. I'm not the minister
But you
of
speak for
health.
them.
I don't speak for them. I happen to be a citizen who votes Museveni. That's not a lie. And therefore, like you, I'm also a consumer of these services. So I wouldn't really know. I can only assess them on what they have promised and what is on paper and what I've seen in the next budget and the allocations and what I can clearly see just randomly. And I would imagine that at least we are not as how we were 10 years ago or 15 years ago.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Is there
Rugyendo.
movement? Because the most important thing is not to say there's nothing that has been done, because that is actually intellectually dishonest. The most important thing is, are we seeing regression or progress? That's the most important thing. And for me, I'm seeing baby steps in terms of progress in some of these things, especially when it comes to social services. The water coverage, you really.
That question is important for our citizens
Clean
out
water
there.
coverage, there's no question about it.
Rugyendo, that question is important for us out there, the citizens out there.
In the distribution of electricity is the challenge. We need to address corruption in electricity distribution, not electricity generation. Because generation is I think there's improvement in terms of how what was being generated in 1986, that's 60 megawatts, and now 1,300 plus megawatts. Why we don't have this power and why we can't access it cheaply is the question.
Thank you very much.
But
Rugyendo. Let's have a short break. Let's have a short break and continue with this debate. I thank you very much, citizens, for keeping on the show, and we're progressing. The next segment of this discussion, we are going to
stop turning him into a government spokesman.
Yeah, we are going to discuss the prospects of the new term that we've just witnessed that has been ushered into. So, right there, stay with us, and we go for this short break and return. Thank you very much. This is a Citizens Chat Show. Follow this debate is on Twitter, Chat Show UG, and online YouTube and Facebook. Thank you very much.
The Citizens Chat Room happens every Friday at 2 p.m. on Civic Space TV Online on Facebook and YouTube. We invite you to be part of this conversation. Civic Space TV, freedom always.
Welcome back to this from the break. We've been having a very interesting conversation off camera, and today I've been joined by the highly energized people just from last week, and yes, Joseph from the FAR, Sarah and Rugyendo, who has joined me. Rugyendo, by the way, I'm going to constantly control. Next time you will have to sit very far from me, because I think when I tell you to stop, you don't stop. So this time I need to control you well.
Not because you don't protect me from the opposition.
So we've
they're so intimidating. They're so intimidating.
So we've just had
They don't want to behave like NRM. That's the problem. They want to behave like NRM and control the space.
NRM
The political space.
So we just had a very long holiday, and the holiday had the swearing in on 12th of May 2021, just on Wednesday, and of course Eid Mubarak to our Muslim friends for the celebrations you had yesterday. I didn't receive an invitation, but maybe next year I'm hopeful. And yes, the swearing in happened, and of course that ushered in the new government. And right now we're saying that yes, the new manifesto is happening. It happened from the midnight of Wednesday. That's when the new government was ushered in, and we are looking at the prospects of the new government that we have today, but the government still under President Yoweri Museveni. So I will want us to dissect that deeply and see the speech. Ochieno, did you follow?
There was a power cut in my house.
But Umeme said we shall have a bright day the whole time.
Well, Umeme forgot me because I wasn't in Kololo and I was not in the guest list. But very sad. Somehow I managed to get a little bit of a clip. But number two, I was contacted by 2 foreign media to give my thoughts on this, and by a local media to give my thoughts. But I could not go online. But somehow they had my local number. So in a way, I had to force myself and look for a bit of the speech. But of course, much later, I managed to go through the speech, bits of the speech, when power sympathized and came back. You know, is it Umeme power? Now,
but right there, we had about 11 heads of state. Yeah, 11 heads of state. Then we, of course, in there, the president talked about the center of gravity for African nations, and of course the mood and the force and the attitude that he was using to present his speech was not really friendly to the foreign friends and I would want to say the partners, the foreign partners, and of course he kept on hitting and brought in the issues of Libya and all these attacks. But in there, he concluded with Uganda, and of course he talked about the 4 areas of where he felt we would possibly score. Sarah talked about the 100 days. Maybe that's where we would possibly score him on. He talked about commercial agriculture. He talked about industries, services, and ICT. These are clearly in the NDP3. And of course, from the break, we're saying that they have even the smallest share. I don't know what you think about this.
no, we shall wait for the 100 days. Maybe it will be the 36th year wait, and then there will be some drama. Because in 100 days, I don't think we can expect anything we've not seen in the last 35 years. But you also right, he talked about the center of gravity for Africa. In one of my last columns in New African magazine, I talked about the absence of gravity. And it was very interesting, almost as if he read this piece, that Africans really don't make any sense or mean anything, because only Africans who can be killed in the streets of London, killed in the streets of New York, and many times also be robbed in the streets of Kampala, and it doesn't matter. If one Jewish-related Jewish blood gets lost in America, it becomes a global headline and a matter for debate in the UN. So if only he meant it. On the one hand, they couldn't be center of gravity in Africa, where the most advanced economy is South Africa, which was an apartheid nation until recently, and which is sort of the most sophisticated economy on the continent. That is work in progress. Or possibly Nigeria, which is now the largest economy. Kenya is doing very well, relatively. And in 35, had we gone at the pace in which his figures refer, maybe would now have emerged as a middle-income economy by 2001. 2011 would have shot, as the finance minister would say. So, but the more important point, the center of gravity for Africa will be emerge from an African country and African leadership that brings together Africanists from a Pan-Africanist point of view. Now, the Pan-Africanism concept generally here is always about collective Africans in one heart. But no, it's very much an ideology around African identity and brotherhood that embraces, the African personality beyond the boundaries of the African continent. And it's about emancipation of the African peoples, but it's also an African identity versus the oppressors of Africa. Now, that cannot come from a Mr. Museveni, who has been the expert, enforcer and on behalf of imperialism on the African continent. Now, to be fair to Museveni, other than himself, I actually don't know an African leader, I don't know an African country today that I could actually say are really the leaders of the emancipation of the African personality. Now, I don't see that here on the mainland, nor do I see it anywhere, perhaps even in Haiti or Brazil. Now, that's the contradiction from that. And yet on the other, which was your point, second point, was the bashing of his imperialist friends, the West. I suggest that that was really much more for the cameras, much more for the domestic guests, domestic audience, and much more for his predominantly African brethren who go to sing and sleep at the AU. It wasn't really anything more than that. Because the issue is that Museveni has been sustained in power by these forces. Sarah has given fantastic statistics on the Ugandan economy and our dependence on these Western countries. Museveni's own complaint is because 30 years ago, when some of us were campaigning to expose human rights abuse in this country, his friends would say they're having quiet diplomacy and that they talk to him quietly. In fact, that was official from London and Washington. Now they come out and then they say, we're going to sanction, or Mr. Museveni, you're going to expose. So that's really the only change that has taken place. And for that, Museveni is just like behaving like a sport boy. But where are we going forward, very briefly? I think 2 days ago was a wasted opportunity. Mr. Museveni, as leader who's very old and very tired at 35 in power, should have said to his friends, the people who actually sustained him, including the people about whom and without whom those jets flying around Kololo wouldn't have appeared, to say that, look here, friends, we hear you. Look here, friends, and look here, fellow citizens and fellow Africans. I think we've made some progress, but we really genuinely erred, And for fellow citizens, I think those who lost lives, those who lost relatives, and those who've disappeared, I am going to use this term to try and do something different. I am, for instance, going to say no to corruption rather than the nonsense about e-economy being the panacea to corruption. Because if it were, it would already have happened 5 years ago. So, in my opinion, it was a lost opportunity. I don't really genuinely expect to see anything different. Now, even as of today, possibly when he constitutes his cabinet and makes a first national address, it is still possible for him to come out as a statesman. I'm giving him free advice, and say, look, I'm a grandfather, I have seen it all, I have done it all, I'm not perfect. After all, I'm not Bwana Jesus. I don't know whether he genuinely does the Bible or not. I don't know. I hope he does. And if he does, he could actually recognize that none of us are perfect. Seek apology from Bwana Jesus. And God is always very kind and because the Father to all of us, whichever faith it is. So I think Mr. Museveni has an opportunity to tone down rather than shout, tone down onto Ugandans rather than shout, and particularly because in Kololo there was no formal democratic opposition presence. After 35 years, that is a crude indictment. And after 35 years, especially an election in which nearly 60 people died, and even as you celebrate, there are people, and Sarah will expand on this, who are still missing. Considering what allegedly took Museveni to the bush, it is actually a very extremely unfortunate occurrence that it should happen in our country. He still has a chance, he's got a possibility, but I think also recognizes, especially because he lost Buganda directly and totally. And especially because he knows he's unlikely to regain it, because he will not regain it, he doesn't have the time really to regain it. Whoever and whichever way he appoints his cabinet, does he recycle some of these expert looters and thieves and turns them into, e-performers, to check different kind of departments? Does he get one of them to be his deputy, to become a vice president? Does he present a minister of finance who looks, financially prudent? Does he pick a minister of defense who's a nationalist and interested in this country? Does he pick a minister for internal affairs who will be directly the political head of the police? That police then will become a national organization that is there to defend the lives and properties of the citizens of this country rather than to play partisan. Wait and see. So he's got this huge opportunity. And particularly, I think earlier, the other segment, we had this conversation around figures. Does he, in the composition of his government, present it in a manner in which it is very clear that his ministerial appointees are people who are going to deliver on agriculture and the other areas that you talked about? Personalities and individuals who come with stature, with ability, and he says, I give you jobs to do, like Obote used to say, give people departments, and they run those departments. Forget about even the civil servants, meaning the PSs, but the ministers. They do their jobs. And then when you come to cabinet, you debate, you justify your ministerial spendings to your colleagues in cabinet. And then by the time it goes to parliamentary committees, neither here nor there. There's a way in which governments are run. These guys have been around for such a long time, and how they've failed to see how governments are run and delivered for people, I haven't a clue. But he's got an opportunity. Whether the intention is there and the determination is there, I do not know. The people of this country, I believe, genuinely would like, even in this mess where we are in Kololo, but soldiers are running around Kampala as if it's a war zone, still have this ability to forgive and give Mr. Museveni a chance. And I think he's got a chance to show us that it is possible that he wants this country to be a country beyond him.
Thank you very much, Joseph. To Sarah, what is your general overview on the events that happened around 12?
Well, going by the president's speech, he mentioned 4 key areas: patriotism, markets through regional integration and Pan-Africanism, socio-economic transformation, and democracy as number 4. If you go to the 10 points program that we've just finished evaluating, democracy was number 1. Eliminating all forms of sectarianism was number 3. Social services was number 6, and Pan-Africanism was number 9. So they are just recycling the 10 points program slogan. And if you go to the national development plan, the drivers and then the manifesto, there was an attempt by the manifesto team to integrate the National Development Plan 3 in the manifesto so that there is harmony in programming for the country. But when you come to the budget, the debate we have just finished, then the spirit of NDP 3, other than putting a special program for NDP, because if you have a national development plan, the national development plan should be, a blueprint for all government planning. Whether you are NRM, whether NUP had one, whether FDC had one, this becomes a country's basis for programming and implementation, taking the country forward, regardless of who is in power. And that's why it's completed before elections. So all these parties and contenders have access to this document to integrate them in their manifesto and priorities. But when you come to the budget, there's a difference between talk and action. And the common saying is that talk is cheap. So when you have these areas of patriotism, sectarianism, socio-economic transformation, and democracy at number 4. So if we were to quickly score these areas and say, okay, from 86, can we say we have worked a 60% journey on democracy? Can we say we have worked a 70% journey on socio-economic transformation? Where are we on patriotism? Is patriotism taught? Can you force people to love their country? Or it's the actions? Because if I was a leader, I wouldn't mention patriotism as a key area. I would focus on actions that unite the country and remove the political fragmentation and mistrust, which automatically then makes people have an attachment to their
Have a
country.
sense of pride.
Yes. I know that, people, it's Churchill who said, don't ask your country what they can do for you, but ask yourself what you can do for your country. Kennedy, yes. But in our case, I'm sure that even we have, apathy at all levels, including paying tax. Because as a common person, even as we sit here, I know half of a week we don't have power, electricity in this office. So, look at the roads we drive on in Kampala. If you drive in a straight line, there are 80% chances that you are drunk, because you cannot. If you, you must dodge potholes, you must dodge whatever is in the road. So if you are moving straight and it's in the evening, I'm sure your fellow motorists will try to avoid you, thinking that you are drunk. So but so if you go to hospitals, in Kampala we can talk of hospitals. I did ask my brother when he was talking of services. Itojo used to be a very powerful hospital during the times that we were children. I know. Yes.
Yes, we did.
Yes. And
As
a
most
few
of them.
years ago, rain was going through. It was even raining in the theater. The hospital is dilapidated. It was raining through, and we have been advocating for its renovation. Many hospitals countrywide. In Ochieno, we do not have a government hospital. We have Chizoba Farmers, which is a clinic that came from the cooperative movement. We don't have. We have Ishaka now, the Kampala International University, which is pure.
The UPC.
Yes, no.
You missed out on the opportunity.
Yeah, we have
UPC
now
should
the
have put
Kampala.
it.
But then how about the 35 years? Because we need to underscore the point that President Museveni has occupied 60% of post-independent Uganda. I don't know a government hospital in my place. I know they are at sub-county, but there is never anything. If you find a doctor, there is no medicine. If you find medicine, there is no doctor. And this is what we are talking about. We know that there was an attempt to build health centers 3 and 4. We did a pictorial survey a while back, like in 2012, of these new hospitals. Most of them were buildings being commissioned. No equipment, no doctors, no housing for doctors, no toilets. So really, a hospital is beyond a building. A hospital must have equipment, must have medicine, and must have personnel.
Yeah.
Nurses are on strike. I think they called it off the other day. Over hardship allowance for COVID that was approved by Parliament at the beginning of the pandemic, but has never been paid to the nurses of this country. So this is the kind of service delivery that we are talking about. It's also important to underscore the fact that during COVID, which we thought it was an opportunity to revamp our health sector and make it modern, our health infrastructure. We lost 2 doctors in Umarago who were put on fake oxygen. 2 specialized doctors. So these are things that we need to interrogate so that before somebody makes a speech and slogans, what is the baseline? And what are the indicators, verifiable indicators of where we want to go? So I think it's more of the same. There's nothing new.
Rugyendo, you are a student of Museveni or Musevenism. Do you think what he
I am a
really,
student of Africa
what he really is,
and revolutionary theory. Yes, first of all, I want to correct something you mentioned briefly. Those jets, the Sukhois, were bought by you and me, the Ugandans, through the little money we picked from the oil deal. So those jets are not from the actors.
Where were they bought from?
We bought with our
No,
money.
but from where? From where?
With our money.
From where?
From Russia, but with our money.
I
That's
was-
what I'm talking about.
You're making a fantastic point from
Yes,
it.
yes.
That those jets with
They are
this,
both
this
big-
ball busting
No, no, no,
yesterday,
you were
and the
saying-
jets they were using to scare off people
No, no, you were
2 days
not-
ago
not scare off
were,
people.
were actually jets bought with our money, and we really didn't need, and we don't need those
No,
jets.
we need them.
We don't need those
Strategic security, we need them. But importantly,
who-
importantly, let me tell you something. Importantly, you said that they were funded by the Museveni's friends, those so-called friends that he was attacking. It's not true. They never funded them. They were funded by us, you and I. But that's beside the point. Tomorrow, the other day's speech. I want to say this honestly speaking. I wouldn't want to judge the president on something that he has not done. We now have a new government in place. I only want to say what I expect and what I project. But in terms of the speech and what I can score about that speech, Museveni is a very good and I think a strong policy president, really. Even in terms of internationalization, very, very strong. Strong ideas, strong views. Especially, I was more excited about the issue of having a strong Africa. And I think whether someone is a dictator or not, or has overstayed or not, the issue about the strategic security, the strategic positioning, the strategic economic empowerment of the African continent is of paramount importance and transcends political partisanship, and in my view, and anybody who's really trying to rally the country into that direction must be supported.
Who's the chairman of
Africa, is it Alpha Conde something? But the issue here, in my view, is the means of getting towards that, and he's tried really. He said, for example, it's a shame that we have these hotspots across some of these parts of the continent. In Eastern Congo, I've now heard that Congo has allowed UPDF to go back inside and see how to flush out the DF. We have a situation in Cabo Delgado, ironically, where the president trained from. But I've also heard that the president there is trying to speak to Rwanda now to send troops there. Then, of course, you have the crisis in Chad, you have the crisis in what? But
we also not in terms with our neighbor.
The unfortunate thing that really lets some of these statements down is where Africa is failing to really create a standby force, to flash out some of these things, some of these elements. Like we've been, like AU tried to be successful in Somalia, but yes, conflicts will happen. But we need a continent that really believes in strategic security, in building capabilities for our strategic security. And this is where I'm in bed with the president about this, because he's very forthright. The issue is whether the rest of the continent thinks it is necessary or believes in him. If we don't do that, and I agree with you, if we don't do that, I think Africa really, we are doomed. I wrote an article for the magazine, for the Uganda Media Center about this event of yesterday, and I was projecting the future and what needs to be done, and I was really observing that countries are moving to Mars, countries are sending projections in the interspace. They're trying to explore Mars, Jupiter, and all these other planetary beings, and first we are here still discussing about cassava and all these things, and that's the entire Africa, and we're not thinking into that direction. Our education system is not preparing our children in terms of that sophistication to be able to craft solutions that can take us at par with the rest of the continent. Africa has so many bases, a number of, I think, 11 or 12 bases of the U.S. Army here. Why should we have bases here? Why don't we have our own bases, manned by African armies, very well trained to protect the continent against any aggression? I agree with him on that in terms of speech. But the rest of what he's promising, I think it is the usual. Really, he's promising the usual, and I expected from him something to do with reflecting, especially about what happened in the last election. For me, in my own view, I really expect that the president should rally the country into reflecting about the key issues that really came out of the last election. Because they point us to where we really ought to be and ought to go. Number one, I witnessed a lot of national anger, really. And there was no attempt to try to understand where this anger is coming from. Unnecessary anger, where you see really people going out of their way and they couldn't care, and that for me is a critical area where I expect research, serious research, and critical response, because it is important that if we are progressing as a country, and we've done so much in the last 35 years, how do you explain that level of national bitterness? Where is it coming from? You have all these about 5,000 plus kilometers of tarmac road, now 8,900. Just a moment, don't interfere. We have factories, 8,900 of them now. No, 8,090 something number of factories. As I speak right now, I've been trying to do some research.
Cotton factories, what level?
Whatever they are, what I'm trying to say, there is the assumption, that there is some progress in very many areas. But why the bitterness? And I want to see a president who is trying to reach out and say, yes, 36% of this country in the last election raised these issues. We have a new government now, a government for everybody. And so now you raise these issues. This is how we think we can provide answers to these issues. Yes, we won, fine, but I want to see that after 35 years, I want to start seeing a scaling down of the winner takes it all kind of political attitude in this country, because it can't go on that you have close to 4 million people who don't agree with your program and consistently, and then we say it's fine. No, I think it is important to say, yes, we have our program, but you raise these issues and we think they are very fundamental. Some of them are not, others we think are fundamental. How can we build together? How do we, this is what I suggest, and I don't see, and I see some kind of a vanquisher trying to say, we won and this is our program, whether you like it or not, we're moving in this direction. And that keeps the polarization. I want to see a program, an attitude, an intention to scale down the polarization in this country and the bitterness, and also, of course, the 4 areas that he mentioned. I wait to see how best they can really solve the issue of the 60% who are not in the money economy, because I think Uganda's challenge is just money, nothing else. People need some money in their pockets, and we must ensure that there are programs in place that put money in people's pockets. That is the only problem I've seen in Uganda. And then I think finally that point that I wanted to add is that I expected him to say enough is enough.
What?
Of impunity within NRM, because I think the impunity in NRM is something that NRM people keep glossing over. And just easy does it. Everybody just does. Fantastic programs, but when it comes to implementation, there is a problem there. And you can't see. And then the people who are deployed sort of gives that impression that I think there's no commitment to have some things implemented, to have some problems, some solutions put in place. And this is, for me, the enlightenment in that speech that I have, personally speaking, because if you listen to different programs, radio programs, and they read about the different commentaries in the newspapers and other spaces, the major issue is that we don't see action. We don't see genuine action, or if there's action, we don't see action that needs to be seen. And And I think that is where I want to project that the next 5 years should focus. We need to watch and see in the next few days or few weeks the kind of deployment in cabinet should be able to give us an indication of where the president's mind is. I have heard, if I don't know whether it's true, that he's also not very happy with some of his people. I just hope and pray that we see some new faces that have the technical abilities to implement some of these good programs to the letter and for the people, because there's that problem always, the excitement in the first year and then everything returns to normal. In the first 3, 4, 5 months, things, you see some bit of action going on, and then afterwards, Uganda just returns to normal. And then we have to wait for another election cycle to repeat the same things. And for me, this is the problem I have. And I was hoping that in the speech, the president would say, okay, going forward, this is not even just Sanja Mchezo, but if you are so and so and you've been charged with implementing this particular project X and nothing has happened to my satisfaction in the next 100 days, you are no more. And Ugandans just need to see quick wins. Just some quick wins. Because Ugandans, like you said, actually, are really forgiving. And they always want to give you the benefit of doubt all the time. So to be able to seize that moment, you need to show, to sort of do some quick wins. And this is not what I am seeing at the moment. And probably maybe in the next 1 or 2 or 3 months, we will see some quick wins. We will see some impunity being cracked down upon, and deployments, of some kind of serious people around certain strategic deliverables that need to bring hope to people, and I also want to see finally, some move towards. Okay, there's iPod, but I think some serious move towards political reconciliation in this country. There's a lot of polarized bitterness, political bitterness, and some demonstration that there can be discussion, and there can be certain areas we can agree on, even if we don't agree politically. But there are certain key values as a country that we can promote, whether you agree with my political line or not. And what are those values? I want to see them stated somewhere, and people pledging towards them, whether you are Bob Wine or you're Mugisha Muntu or you're Yoweri Museveni or anyone, and they say, but these are the minimum values, these are minimum interests, national interests that we agree on, and we have stated them. Okay. And I want to see IPOD really, or some other mechanism that really spells them out, and now, not just 3 years towards the election. And then we start a conversation around them.
Thank you, Rugyendo. Right there, it brings in the issue of harmonizing and bringing all the players from the different political parties. But we are seeing in his speech, he didn't, like Rugyendo said, it didn't really sound like there's anywhere going to be reconciliation and with all the other political parties. And this is being swept, this anger is constantly being swept into under the carpet, yeah? The young people are really in the tension, and you saw that kind of deployment around, and from nowhere, curfew was really. So do you think we shall see a semblance of reconciliation happening?
I don't see it. And as I said before, I've said twice already on this program, it's what I expected him to do. And Rugyendo reinforces my point. Mr. Museveni has got an opportunity over the next several days, and possibly in the inclusion the way he composes government. But it's really more from him what he says. He could go to church or to a mosque or to some shrine and come out of the shrine and say, I've spoken to either Rohama or some dubious gods from Abira forests, but that is me and my gods. But you to the people of Uganda, I think this is the thing. So he can say it at any time. He can stop over at the traffics in Lugogo and say, I'm sorry, I've just blocked you guys, my boys were being rude, but by the way, I'm talking to Ugandans. Museveni can do it at any time and present himself as leader, in a conciliatory way, and simply say that, he can even go ahead and say, the other day at Entebbe, I was just talking to some organized audience, because he can be a comedian, and people buy it from him. So he's got the opportunity to do so. It has to come from him. And by this, it's really more about what he says, and how he implements it with the people of Uganda than anything else. It can happen. It can happen. We really still hope it genuinely happens. Because I think Sarah and I, during break, and I think Rugyendo was having special coffee, we're saying that, this country, we only don't do faith, but it's actually possible amongst ourselves when you look closely. We are very much nitty one people, with the common agenda again, as Rugyendo is saying, so it's possible. But just quickly, Rugyendo, when you talk about the economics thing, I'll bring out my UPC, in a nice way. Milton Obote, in 1980, when he just landed, apparently a delegation from Buganda came. Rugyendo, you're a journalist and you like to do history. That went to see him. Apparently, after all the conversations, they asked him, now we're going home, what do we do? I don't know whether I've ever told one of these programs. Apparently, what they said, look, go and thank the people, tell them, thank them for having lived with the mean, they should live with the mean and struggle to live with the mean and their fights and everything else. But for the people, meaning Buganda, tell them to go into their gardens, grow their coffee as usual, do their matoke, focus on their production and focus on their businesses, We as a government will make sure that we buy all their produce. I'm using very basic economic terms. Buy all their produce, guarantee farm implements in terms of what they want. We shall import whatever else is lacking, and we shall create a situation in which, I think those eventually, they came window 1, window 2, where if you want to buy foreign exchange at the time, you would buy it cheaply if you're going to buy farm implements compared to when you want to go and meet your ex-girlfriend somewhere in Stockholm. So I'm told the Buganda delegation, what they were expecting was, go, divide Buganda into 4, take a few soldiers, A, B, C, D, make sure you win 5 constituencies in Buganda. The point is, Obote knew that UPC was not necessarily popular in Buganda. UPC was not necessarily going to win many seats in Buganda. We ended up winning 1, It was really not about majority, we must win Buganda, But Buganda is the most critical part of Uganda. They are our nationhood reality. This is a delegation from them. What is the best of them they can expect from us? We shall guarantee them security. Unfortunately, Museveni and Kagame spoiled it in Luwero. Not the government, spoiled it in Luwero. We shall make sure that we guarantee them productivity. We shall stock their hospitals, equip their schools, and make sure that they live like citizens of the country. That is a story told to me by a major Buganda elder who was a member of that delegation. I was told this story about 12 years ago. It rolls into my head. That, in my opinion, is leadership. If you translate that into the broader nation who said the thing that we're trying to talk about, Museveni would have scored 100%. Finally, though, I need to talk about this African security thing. Just to put a context. Uganda under Museveni has fought wars with every neighboring country except Tanzania. Just think about it. Every neighboring state except Tanzania. At the moment, Uganda is not under threat from any of the immediate neighbors. But Uganda continues to be a net security threat in those countries. And it's public knowledge, Rugyendo, you know it. What are we doing in South Sudan, supporting one side? What are we doing in Congo, where we're going to now pay trillions of shillings? And it's not my money, your money, it's not money from the guys who went there to equip themselves and build castles in Kampala on that. What are we doing? Why shouldn't we have the best relationship with Rwanda? We invaded Rwanda and gave them everything else, and even the Ugandans went ahead and died for them. Why shouldn't we be enjoying that piece of the creation of a Rwandan state that we did? So these are some of the failures under NRA, NRM. And looking back where we are today, including those aircraft that are flying, and put in context, what I was saying was, we bought those aircraft from Russia using our monies that should actually cushion our national budget. because the Western guys were abusing two days ago, we're equipping and sustaining another element, the other element of our budget. See, we could only buy those because these guys were giving us money. That's the concept within which I was saying. You can't go and buy sweets when children are crying simply because of aspirin, or they don't have water, they don't have food. It's common sense. That's really the context. So anyway, going forward, the stock, as I said, I gave 0, and I'm not yet to review it because there's no figure to, there's nothing, no way I'm going to review it for the reason given. Going forward, we are now stuck with Museveni from the last 2 days. He equipped himself and endorsed himself. How do we move? He needs to become the statesman. He needs to begin to review, and Rugyendo is right. He could simply say that, well, from today onwards, this corruption thing, all the outstanding reports, if you know that you've been whatever on this kind of stuff, basically watch out, this was going to happen. Or going forward, this is the kind of things that's going to happen. These are going to be minimum requirements. But we know that Museveni can't check these guys because it's been roped. Most of these guys who are involved in top-level corruption are his cronies. And most of these guys, he cannot point a finger at that one because that one is going to point a finger back at him. Now, that's common knowledge. And you NRA guys, you know that this is a fact. Now, how he deals with those things, I do not know. Maybe he can tell them that let's start stealing slowly because we're getting older and carrying most of the bulk of these monies in wheelbarrows is getting harder and harder for us. But also at the same time, Ochieno great-grandchildren also need little bits. After all, they want to pay back 1.5 million shillings each of them.
No, oil is going to take care of that.
No, yeah, I listened to Rugyendo, and I agree with what he has said. The polarization in this country, the behavior of government or its representatives, the connection. How does a common man connect with government, or how does government represent itself in the lives of the common man? We have all said, and it's factual, that 80% of our national economy is controlled in Kampala by 3 million or 3.5 that live in Kampala. But what is the relationship between these people that produce 80% of the economy and the government? The relationship is tear gas. The relationship is chuboko. The relationship is pandagari. Just ahead of swearing in. Public transport stopped working at 7. People walked home. People were beaten by soldiers as they walked home. Borders driving people beaten. Yet our curfew time starts at 9. Even a curfew that is irrelevant because I don't think COVID spreads in the night. But for whatever justification it is, I know, that's why I said I think it's irrelevant as a citizen. I know all bars work. I am not so much of a person that goes to bars, but I know bars work at midnight, at 2, so saying you are putting a curfew to stop people from gathering. And the most unfortunate bit for me, to show the irrelevance of the curfew, was the statement by Minister of Internal Affairs to say that if you don't have money, why do you work in the night? It was very absurd. And that's what happens. People are working in the night. Even, maybe taking the advice of their minister, I don't know. So for what purpose the curfew serves, I can assure you, it does not stop people from gathering. Last night I thought there was a party at a petrol station just here as you go towards Chuature Shell. I thought there was a kind of a party, many cars parked, policemen. When I reached Kuroza, they were just drinking in the open.
Wow.
In the open.
What time was it?
I mean, I was at UBC and this was after midnight.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, in the open. So what purpose does the curfew serve other than using it as a conduit to extract money from poor people? The most people suffering under the curfew are people who walk on foot, people who use borders.
Yes,
The motorists are not affected. So we are creating a nation which favors those who have some little money and endangers the poor people intentionally. So what
It is
is...
causing anger, in the
But why
people,
can't
honestly.
people be annoyed? I mean, how does government treat them? How does government represent itself in their lives? How does government manifest in people's lives? It is chuboko, it is arbitrary arrests, it's abductions, it is killings, extrajudicial killings, it is kidnaps, it is tear gas. Why can't people be annoyed? Does it surprise anybody? Does it need even to do a study? How does government manifest itself? You know, the government should, in a normal country, a government should manifest itself through good roads, through functional hospitals, through functional schools. You go to a hospital, you are checked, you are treated, you are given medicine, and nobody has asked you for money. Then you know government is working. Then you know you are tax. There is a reason why you should pay tax, and tomorrow you will willingly pay that tax because you know that another person is going to leave a hospital happy, like you did.
Yeah.
But does that happen ever in this country? Does anybody experience such a thing? If you go to Marago, you have to start bribing right from admission. You must bribe your way through and through. I have been to Marago. So, what is the relationship between government and the people? And why should they be happy? There is no reason whatsoever. So, for President Museveni, he took oath, and the oath was very clear. Of course, he has taken it. This is the 7th time that he was taking that very oath. Respect the laws of Uganda. This is a summary of the oath. Uphold the Constitution and protect the welfare of Ugandans. So the choice is with him, either to act as a statesman and the president of everybody, or whether to act as a tribal chief and the president of people who only support him, at the peril of the others who don't support him.
Thank you very much, Rugyendo. I know you.
He's the only person who swears that of all citizens. He should remember the only person who has got that burden of responsibility, as Sarah said, is that. But just very quickly before Rugyendo comes in, I think there's general consensus amongst all of us that really the burden of responsibility lies with him, and it's all about the tone from him, and that tone must be directly as a result of the anger you talked about, and that anger is amongst the majority of the citizens because it's predominant amongst the young people of this country, and it's not going to be washed away. And Mr. Museveni, it's not going to be washed away. The more you actually pump it, the more dangerous it becomes, and I really don't think it serves any individual citizen, or indeed, or any citizen of this country, long term.
From 2016, okay, the last time. Let's first. The last time we talked about Chisanja Hakuna Mchezo, and I don't know whether it was really Chisanja Hakuna Mchezo.
Well,
but now I don't know what we were promised this.
No.
This
Well,
time going forward.
I think towards we've been going through a manifesto week, and I have seen sessions where different ministries are presenting about their performance. About the performance of the 2016 manifesto. Most of them were reporting, in terms of scorecard, 70, 80, percent, and I think, and that ties into what my sister here was talking about, how government is manifesting itself. I think the manifestation is again a process. It's not an instant. It's not an event, and it's not something that you can quantify. Statistically fine, but in terms of precision, is something difficult to know, because somebody today, for example, you're talking about bribing your way to everything throughout Marago. Somebody else will go there and say, for me, actually recently I went there and I was surprised. People didn't know me, but I took a very expensive procedure, but I was not asked for money.
How expensive?
I think I was told the cost was about 720,000 shillings. I wanted to do an endoscopy and an colonoscopy. I wanted to take these things, but I was not asked for money, and it surprised me actually because
pay?
Nobody asked me. They said it's free. I said fine, and I was like, I reflected. I reflected. Yes, I was there. I was lying.
Are you sure they didn't know you?
No, they didn't. They didn't. They didn't. And actually, no, hold on. I even went to that section. It's called the gold section, something like that. That's private wing before you reach the.
Yeah, but you were in the private wing.
Yeah.
So how did you not pay?
Let me come. So I went and it was surprised. So on every, you go there and I challenge you.
Okay.
Just a moment.
I
I
don't
challenge
need
you.
it.
Hold on.
Hold
I
on.
challenge you. Go there. You'll see on different parts of the world. It's actually stated there by the management. Nobody is supposed to pay a single shilling.
In private wing?
Yes.
So why is it private?
I don't understand why, but I will not ask. You will not ask me that.
Why is it private?
You will not.
Malago.
But you guys, I gave you a chance to
Rugyendo
speak.
Official.
Please, I did not interrupt you. So you go there and find out because I'm challenging you. Anybody who is watching this should go there and see. Because I was surprised as well. I was like, okay, so is there an attempt at Malago now probably to improve things? And I think this is where my argument is. That we should see government attempting to improve the way it manifests itself, that's the word you're using, in the lives of the people and being there for them. And I would imagine that there are very many sections of people in this country who feel really they don't feel government, and government doesn't manifest itself properly, and that there should be an improvement. And from the leadership, this is the tone. Thank you for that word. The tone, the speaking, the demonstration. The other day I was at some forum again, where there's so many government people, and I told them, I said, you know, there are small things that some of you people do that annoy us with the citizens. For example, you find somebody driving a government vehicle, but driving on shoulders within a thick traffic jam, just because they are driving a government vehicle. Therefore, the traffic police person cannot even touch them because this is government, and they are clearly floating traffic rules, and thinking they are more important than the people who are patiently waiting in the traffic jam
And there's no
and pay their own
emergency
fuel.
about it.
And there's no emergency about it, and there's no clearance because
And
we
who-
know
who
because
pay
we know
government fuel?
because we know for you to be able to do that, there must be a police lead car. And there's so many cars in this town that have sirens, but they are not police cars. And they're clearing vehicles, private vehicles, clearing certain government vehicles. They said, these are small things. Demonstrate by not doing that. Let's begin there and say, yes, we all want to respect traffic rules. And whether you're in government or not, we are the same people. And that we also face a similar challenge, which is a narrow road and that cannot handle all the number of vehicles at that particular time, and that then we all flow together and we understand and we're sharing in the challenge. That's how the manifestation goes. But for me, the arrogance and the impunity is, I think, something that really needs to be addressed in this next time because I think Ugandans really have given NRM a lot of chances in terms of demonstrating proper service delivery, proper engagement with the citizenry, and they would want to see more because they pay their taxes, and they realize that the tax, the basket really has grown big, and the collections really are impressive. But what we see most in terms of budgetary allocation, for example, you will notice that you see more of a consumptive government than a productive government in terms of where monies are being allocated. We are more into consumption, and for me, the point should be that going forward, if we must improve in terms of the way government manifests itself in people's lives, we need to see an enterprising government. An enterprising government is a government that is cost cutting in terms of the way it carries out its business. Cost cutting that allocates and pays more attention to the business side of the country more than the public service consumption side, because you realize that there's so much money that is into expenditure, lots of expenditure in areas, in activities that actually do not have a return on investment. And for me, that way, if government improved there, then we would have improvement in attitude towards government. People will know that the government now cares. We'll have so many medicines available for everyone, and also attitude. How do you handle me when I enter a government facility? Just a mere demonstration at the reception, how I'm received, how I am served. Demonstrates lots of things about how government cares about its people. I'm sure you guys have entered some of these facilities, and you'll be shocked. Really, you'll be shocked to really see the kind of care that you get. Sometimes you realize that you have to look after yourself, to be on your own, and I think these are the areas where we need to address, and especially the people, the NRM people who support the government. This government really needed to put pressure on the state to say that we cannot continue having electoral advantage. To be able to even improve it, there is a clear need to demonstrate that we care about our people.
Thank you.
More than we think we are doing.
Thank you very much. Ochieno, the president can't work alone. Yeah, and he's now almost, let me say, he's in the evenings, the late evenings of his rule. Yeah, tenure.
He might be starting.
He might be okay, and shouldn't this be the time that the president,
Of course.
the president should now
Assuming
look
that
at
he's voted.
expertise, look at
Assuming that he's
potential,
voted.
look at be highly critical on the kind of ministers he appoints in the different departments, because I think we also have a problem with the kind of appointments that he makes, especially in these ministries.
No, I think it's partly what I said, but partly I think what Sarah mentioned. To the extent that it's important, the personnel that he appoints, which even I advocated, the bottom line is really actually him, because the buck ends with him.
And we should see less interference of him on these ministries.
Which really is the case, that less interference, especially if it is not an interference to push bad, where there have been cases where he rings ministries, he rings departments, he rings government agencies, Rugyendo, and instructs heads of organizations to do certain biddings, including when it involves contracts. That is actually known. We know stories about interventions about DOT services and roads. Is he going to be able to do so this time around? We would like to believe and hope that he doesn't do it. It's very unlikely that this guy is going to change at this very late evening of his life. But it's our hope he does, because on a serious note, he genuinely needs to do so in our national interest. I think that whether or not the conversation that has been taking place the last few months, and after the elections, and after the beatings, and after now the swearing in 2 days ago, means that Mr. Museveni has conversations with people. I don't know who Museveni's friend is, genuinely, in Uganda. I don't know who Mr. Museveni's friend is, whether it's a Ugandan or across Africa, that he basically listens to somebody. Obviously, there are a few. There will be there, some of his officials say. But I genuinely don't know. I doubt whether there's anybody whom Museveni actually considers a friend who he listens to. Now, that's a major weakness. But in the event that he doesn't listen to anybody, I think he needs to listen to himself and to Ugandans. All I may ask of him, and it's almost as if I'm summing up, because I know it's like time bad. If only Mr. Museveni could say that I am going to, if God protects me, be 40 years in power, what will be my legacy after 40 years? Even if he's going to rule for 50, there have been stories about this 50-year thing, you know. What will be my legacy after 40 years? Let him focus on corruption. Whatever he does, whether he does it or not, I have my doubts, but I'm just giving him headlines. But number two, let it not happen again. And I beg Mr. Museveni, the Nigerian will say, I beg that under no circumstance, really, day two of Mr. Museveni from Kololo, that no Ugandan should again die unnecessarily. And in particular, no Ugandan should be killed by a member of Museveni's security services again deliberately. And that anybody who dies, even if it were accidental, they must be held to account. And that surely in this 40th reign of Museveni, may there be a stop to disappearances, torture, and brutality. And that may it be possible for us to have harmony as a country. And may it be possible that there's differences in diversity. That may it be possible that in this country, our national resources, including the oils that Rugyendo was announcing earlier, be monies for our people. And may it be possible that there's a sign that Ugandans matter more than anything or anybody else. That for once, amongst us Ugandans, let us Ugandans matter. But for those who rule this country in our names, may it be the case that as the National Union of Students of Uganda, those days used to say for students of this country, our slogan was that Uganda first. Let it be Uganda and Ugandans first under his reign. Whichever way he does it, if he does just those things, I will not be content. There's no way in which it's possible for him to undo the 35 years of mess. But he will have gone a long way to making a conclusive part of his reign, and particularly for the younger people who are emerging in the political space today. They may just about accidentally give him an average tick as part of his legacy.
Thank you, Joseph. Sarah, do you think now that we have him and we are in the evenings, we could see less of allowed systems operate on themselves with less interference in this new term?
You know, I want to draw from two of his remarks during his speech. One was a statement that nobody cares about the African people. And unfortunately, he forgot to mention that even him, he does not care about the lives of Ugandans who don't belong to his party and who do not support him, which is very unfortunate. He was pointing a finger at the Latin America, but the four fingers were pointing at him. What is the life of people who support other political leaders other than himself, or who belong to other political parties other than his own? Having a different political view than that of the people in power does not reduce citizens to second or third class citizens, like is the case here in Uganda. He also mentioned that the West has no business lecturing him about the democracy, because we have so many elective posts, right from local council 1 to MP. I'm glad he didn't mention the president, because I don't know how many Ugandans voted for the president, or how many had the chance, or those who voted, whether their vote was counted or not. That process is not quantifiable. Even the Supreme Court process collapsed. So I don't know at that level really how Ugandans voted. But my call is twofold. One is that people having a divergent political view in a country where we have a multi-party dispensation does not reduce them from second class, from being citizens like those who support him. And he should, like he took an oath, protect lives of all Ugandans and not lives of his own supporters. Second is the current democracy. Democracy has 4 main tenets, and being able to vote is one of them. The 3 others include human rights, include the civic and political life, include the general welfare of the people and rule of law. The way the government is harassing actors in governance, including political opposition and civil society, and this is his government that we are talking about, not any other government. The deplorable state of human rights in this country that has even attracted international sanctions, and the pathetic situation of social justice in this country must be addressed. And lastly, if at all he chooses to do nothing, let him stop excessive and reckless borrowing that puts a burden on future generations of this country.
Rugyendo, finally.
Thank you very much. I want to, first of all, disagree with Sir on one major area, and it's a very sensitive area, and I don't know why you really had to mention it the way you did, that people who do not support NRM or Museveni are treated as second-class citizens.
Because this is the manifestation.
Just a moment. Because I in the last election, for example, I noticed that about 3 million did not vote NRM. Okay.
How many are in custody?
Just a moment.
Or abducted?
Because I would want to say, I would want you to tell me that everybody who is living a second-class citizen life is actually an opposition.
I haven't
supporter.
heard any NRM member
So-
saying
so-
their
so-
person has
so-
been abducted.
So please, I think that is more, that's a bit reckless, because I think, and very unfortunate, because I think if you love statistics, really, I think the point here about people living second-class lives is a question of economics, and it affects everybody, whether you are in NRM or not. I have seen, there are so many poor people in this country, and not all of them actually
Sorry, just to help you.
just a moment. They are not,
I think what
not all of them.
Sarah was not talking economics.
I am
It
coming
was
to
talking,
that.
I am talking about how they are treated by their government.
How they, you want to say 3 million people are...
No, look what opposition candidates arrested even on nomination day.
That's what Sarah
Thank
Look
you.
what that
That is-
brutality. People
this-
killed.
but that is- those
Are
are-
they NRM supporters?
Those are individual people.
Are they
But
NRM
those- but
supporters?
they're not generally, we're not talking about...
Tell me
totality.
any
The totality-
NRM supporter
you say
that
some.
has been beaten
The mo-
or abducted.
So
Tell
many,
me
but
one.
So many.
Which one?
So many.
Which one?
I saw on TV. Let me show you. Let me show you. Don't generalize. I think for me the issue here is you're generalizing. You should say some people who don't support NRM should be treated fairly. I think that's the most important
Should
thing
allow
here.
Rugyendo to conclude,
Because
because
my
we are
point,
time is up.
because my point here is Sarah is giving an impression that the 3+ million people that did not support Museveni are all being brutalized. I really don't think so. It is,
I don't think that's what you mean.
and you also don't want to give the benefit of doubt that probably the security forces have certain
Partisan
questions.
tendencies.
No, questions that they want some people to address, to answer. And because they happen to be in the opposition, everybody will conclude that they're being
Let them
brutalized.
be taken to court
Some
and
have-
they answer those
some
questions.
have.
People are missing for
I have
months.
seen some
For
have
months,
been-
people are
some have
missing.
been in court. I have seen them. Others probably need to be accounted for.
Rugyendo, you need
And
to
the
conclude now.
security forces, I think, have come out to really explain some of these things. For me, I think the most important thing is let's not make sweeping statements and say that people who don't agree with Museveni, all of them are being harassed, all of them are being chased.
You're adding
They are
one
not.
only.
You are the one adding all.
I don't. No, that's what you said.
No.
You said
No.
some because
The conclusion,
because
Rugyendo.
it's not you're not the people that are in prison that
Because our time is
really
up.
voted against you.
Our time
The
is up.
abductions.
There is a 90, probably 98% of
The
people who didn't.
abductions.
Hold on, 98% of people who didn't vote Museveni are going about their lives. And that's important to note. And for me, when we are discussing, I think that should come out. Now, let's conclude. I've really said a number of things, but I think one last one, would be that I really want to see an action-oriented next 5 years. You know, because I think there is a promise. There's a promise of hope in terms of oil revenues that have come in. I've been reading that the government actually has signed into. It's called 80. It's an international kind of check for countries, for oil-producing countries, and the areas that they assess those countries are areas about equitable access to and usage of oil revenues. And this government, Uganda had actually, hesitated for a number of years to sign on that thing, and finally they did. That's a demonstration, in my view, that probably we might see some seriousness in terms of how these revenues will be managed for the benefit of the citizens. And I've been told, I've really heard that probably by 2024, which is within this term, we might see some bit of fast oil flowing, and that is important.
When
because,
are we constructing the pipeline?
Because
our side.
You've been reading, and agreements have been signed. Let's wait and see. But I want to see an action-oriented political dispensation in this coming term, and serious delivery on the promises, and deployment of the right people in the right places, and also a demonstration that all these tensions, we need to, and I'm sure that we can find a way of settling some of these scores. And then of course we agree on a minimum program that allows for everybody to appreciate what actually transcends partisan interests, and we agree on national issues, national interests, and find what is the national interest and what it is and who is responsible for what. And ultimately, I think I project a more probably serious program this time, because I think like I said at the beginning of my analysis, the last election, I hope really, I've interacted with a number of people in NRM, and they, with them really are taking it seriously. There were so many lessons to learn, and I think there had been some bit of relaxation. People taking things for granted, thinking everything is okay, until they were surprised by a number of incidents that we were seeing in the political process. And for me, that was a moment to learn, and I really think and hope and project that there's going to be seriousness in terms of addressing certain key issues that really were prominent in the election. And this term, I mean, this financial year really provides that opportunity. And I hope really the leaders, including the president himself, should be able to really make use of this moment and put certain things right, and we improve the lives of every citizen in this country.
Thank you very much, Rugyendo. Let's conclude.
It's not true.
Let's conclude.
Whoever disagrees with the president
citizens, and,
is in trouble, not true.
Thank you very much for being with us for this extended segment of analyzing the 35 years of President Museveni's reign, and also the special focus on the 10 points program. And we also went ahead to give a projection into the new term that we just saw a few days on 12th, the swearing in. And thank you for being with us throughout this period, and thank you for following on our Facebook, on our YouTube. Kindly subscribe there. Go to our channel, Civic Space TV. Subscribe, do those subscriptions, and be part of the conversation. Uganda is possible. Throughout these conversations, we can have a better country. Thank you very much. I remain your host, Demiano Masesa, and also a special thanks to Ochieno, Sarah, and Rugyendo, who have been with us throughout this time. We hope to meet.
Also called a team.
Team, yes, that's very correct.
Let's meet next week. And good evening.
Thank you very much.